A 30-year-old billionaire CEO sits alone in a fancy restaurant, abandoned in the middle of a blind date. But what shatters her isn't the humiliation, but the moment a strange child hands her a drawing of a woman with broken wings. That's when everything begins to change. Follow my story to the end. Like and comment the city you're viewing so I know how far this story has come. Now, let's begin. The champagne arrived before he did. Aria Bennett sat alone at the corner table, watching condensation bead down the side of the bottle she hadn't ordered. The waiter had placed it there with a practiced smile, the kind that said he'd seen this scene play out 100 times before. A woman, a reservation for two, an empty chair. She checked her phone again. Nothing. Around her, the restaurant hummed with quiet conversations and the delicate clink of silverware against porcelain. Couples leaned across tables. Business associates laughed over wine. Everyone belonged to someone, somewhere. Everyone except her. Aria pressed her thumb against the stem of her water glass, feeling the cool smoothness beneath her skin. She'd built 3 companies from the ground up. She'd walked into rooms full of men twice her age and walked out with their signatures on contracts that made her richer than most of them would ever be. She'd given keynote speeches to thousands, her face projected on screens 3 stories tall. But sitting here, waiting for a man who clearly wasn't coming, she felt like she was 22 again. Small, forgettable, alone. Her assistant had set this up. "You need to get out more," Claire had said, wielding her phone like a weapon. "You can't spend every night in your penthouse reviewing acquisition proposals. You're 30, not 60. Aria had let her do it. A blind date. Some friend of Claire's cousin. A lawyer, supposedly. Successful. Charming. Looking for something real. She glanced at the empty chair again. Real. The word tasted bitter in her mouth. Across the restaurant, a small family occupied a booth near the window. A man, maybe early 30s, with dark hair that looked like it had been cut at home. A little girl, 6 or 7, with wild curls pulled into an uneven ponytail. They were sharing a plate of pasta, the kind of cheap dish that didn't belong on this menu but that the kitchen probably made anyway for families with kids. The girl was drawing on a napkin with a crayon she must have brought from home. The man was watching her with the kind of attention Aria hadn't seen in years, pure, uncomplicated presence. No phone on the table, no watch checking, just a father and his daughter, existing together in a moment that cost nothing and meant everything. Aria looked away. She didn't belong here. She didn't belong anywhere, really, not in boardrooms where men spoke over her until she made them regret it. Not at charity galas where women smiled with their mouths but calculated with their eyes. Not on blind dates with men who didn't show up. Her phone buzzed, finally. But it wasn't him. It was her head of operations sending through revised projections for the Singapore expansion. Numbers. Data. Things that made sense. She opened the email, grateful for the distraction. "Excuse me?" The voice was small, uncertain. Aria looked up. The little girl from the booth stood beside her table, one hand clutching a folded napkin, the other twisting the hem of her shirt. She had a smudge of tomato sauce on her cheek and eyes that were too serious for a child. "Yes?" Aria's voice came out sharper than she intended. The girl didn't flinch. She just held out the napkin. "I made this for you." Aria stared at the offered drawing, not reaching for it. This wasn't how things worked. Children didn't approach strangers in restaurants. Parents didn't let them. She glanced past the girl toward the booth. The man was half standing, looking uncertain, one hand raised in apology. "Sophie," he called quietly, "come back here, sweetheart." But Sophie didn't move. She just stood there, arm extended, waiting. Aria took the napkin. It unfolded in her hands, revealing a crayon drawing done in purple and black. A woman, stick figure simple but somehow unmistakable, stood in the center. Behind her, 2 wings spread out, large and detailed in a way that didn't match the crude body. But the wings weren't whole. They were broken, jagged lines cutting through them, pieces missing, as if something had shattered them from the inside out. Aria's throat closed. "I saw you," Sophie said, her voice matter-of-fact. "You look like her." "Like who?" "The lady with broken wings." Sophie tilted her head. "My mom used to look like that too, before she went away." The restaurant noise faded. Aria heard nothing but her own heartbeat, and the small, honest voice of this child who had somehow seen through every wall she'd built. Sophie. The man was there now, gently taking his daughter's shoulder. I'm so sorry. She doesn't usually... We didn't mean to intrude. He was looking at Arya with genuine mortification, the kind that came from a parent who knew their kid had crossed a line but wasn't quite sure how to fix it. His eyes were kind. Tired, but kind. Arya should have said it was fine, should have smiled politely and sent them away. Should have gone back to her phone and her empty table and the champagne she wouldn't drink. Instead, she heard herself say, "The wings are very detailed." Sophie brightened immediately. "I practiced. Dad says I'm getting better at birds." "You are, Bug." The man, Ethan, she realized, seeing the reservation name scrawled on the booth's check holder, squeezed his daughter's shoulder. "But we should let the nice lady enjoy her dinner." "She's not eating anything," Sophie pointed out. "Just looking at her phone." Arya almost laughed. Almost. Ethan's face flushed. "Sophie, It's true," Arya said. She folded the napkin carefully and set it beside her plate. "I was supposed to be having dinner with someone, but he didn't come." Sophie's face scrunched in confusion. "Why not?" "I don't know." "That's mean." "Yes," Arya agreed. "It is." There was a beat of silence. Ethan shifted his weight, clearly trying to figure out how to extract himself and his too honest child from this situation. Arya should have helped him, should have given him an out. "Would you like to sit with us?" The question came from somewhere she didn't recognize in herself. Some part that had been locked away for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Ethan blinked. "What?" "Your booth looks more comfortable than this table." Arya gestured at the untouched place setting across from her. "And I suspect your daughter has more drawings to show me." Sophie's eyes went wide. "I do. I have a whole folder in Dad's truck." "Bug, we can't just... Please?" Sophie looked up at her father with an expression that probably won every argument they'd ever had. "She's all alone, and she has broken wings." Ethan looked at Arya, really looked at her, and she saw the moment he decided. Not because he wanted to, not because it made sense, but because his daughter had asked, and he had apparently never learned how to say no to her. "If you're sure," he said slowly. "We don't want to impose." "You're not." Arya stood, gathering her purse and phone. The movement felt strange, deliberate, like stepping off a cliff she couldn't see the bottom of. "I'm imposing on you." That almost made him smile. They moved to the booth, Arya sliding in across from Ethan, while Sophie wedged herself in beside her father, bouncing with barely contained excitement. The change in venue was jarring. At the corner table, Arya had been separate, contained, visible, but untouchable. Here, in this worn booth with pasta sauce on the edge of the table and crayons scattered across the surface, she was just another person sharing a meal. It terrified her. "I'm Ethan," he said, extending a hand across the table. "Ethan Cole. And this is Sophie." His hand was calloused, rough, in a way that spoke of actual work. Not the soft, manicured hands of the executives she dealt with daily. These were hands that built things. "Arya," she said, shaking it. She didn't offer her last name. Didn't want to. "Pretty name," Sophie announced. "Like a princess." "More like a CEO," Arya said. Sophie frowned. "What's that?" "Someone who runs a company." "Oh." Sophie considered this. "Dad runs a company too. He builds houses." Ethan laughed, a little self-conscious. "I'm a carpenter." "That's not quite the same thing as running a company." "You have a truck with your name on it," Sophie argued. "That's a company." "She's got you there," Arya said. The waiter appeared, looking confused to find Arya relocated but professionally neutral about it. He set down a fresh water glass without comment. "Can we get another order of the butternut squash ravioli?" Ethan asked. "And maybe some bread?" "Of course." The waiter glanced at Arya. "And for you, ma'am?" She hadn't planned to eat, hadn't had an appetite in weeks, really. But something about the situation, the absurdity of it maybe, or the way Sophie was watching her with open curiosity made her say, "The same. And tell the sommelier he can take back the champagne. I won't be needing it." When the waiter left, Sophie leaned forward. "Were you going to drink all that fancy wine by yourself?" "Sophie," Ethan warned. "It's all right." Arya met the girl's eyes. "I wasn't going to drink it at all," Someone else ordered it. The mean man who didn't come? Yes. Good. Dad says wine tastes like old socks anyway. Ethan put his head in his hands. I said that one time, Bug. One time. Arya did laugh then, a real laugh that surprised her with its genuine sound. When was the last time she'd laughed at something that wasn't carefully calibrated for a business dinner or networking event? Sophie grinned, clearly pleased with herself, then went back to her drawing. This one appeared to be a house, if houses had rainbow roofs and gardens full of flowers the size of the windows. I really am sorry about earlier, Ethan said quietly. She saw you sitting alone and insisted you looked sad. I tried to explain that sometimes people just want privacy, but she was right, Arya finished. I was sad. He didn't push, didn't ask why, just nodded like he understood that some sadness didn't need explanation. How old is she? Arya asked. 7 next month? Going on 30 most days. I can hear you, Sophie said, not looking up from her drawing. I know, Bug. I'm saying nice things. You said I act old. I said you're wise. That's different. Sophie considered this. Okay. The food arrived, plates of delicate pasta and sage butter sauce that probably cost more than Ethan would normally spend on a week of groceries. He didn't comment on it, just cut Sophie's ravioli into smaller pieces and pushed the plate toward her. Arya picked up her fork. The pasta was perfect, rich and earthy with just the right amount of salt. She'd eaten in Michelin-starred restaurants across 3 continents, had meals prepared by chefs whose names alone could fill a dining room. This was good, but not exceptional. Somehow, it tasted better than anything she'd had in months. So what brings you to Morelli's on a Tuesday night? Ethan asked. Besides the blind date that wasn't. My assistant thought I needed to socialize more. Arya twirled pasta around her fork. She was probably right. And you picked here? He picked here. I just showed up. Ethan glanced around the restaurant. The white tablecloths, the low lighting, the prices that probably gave him heart palpitations. It's a bit much for a first date, isn't it? That depends on what you're trying to prove. And what was he trying to prove? Arya met his eyes. That he could afford me. The words came out more bitter than she intended. Ethan didn't react with shock or judgment, just a slight nod of understanding. For what it's worth, he said, anyone who tries to prove they can afford another person isn't worth the effort. Dad says people aren't things you can buy, Sophie added, dragging a piece of bread through the sauce on her plate. Even if you have $1 million. Your dad is very smart. Sophie beamed. I know. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Arya watched Sophie draw, the girl's tongue poking out slightly as she concentrated on adding details to her rainbow house. Ethan ate slowly, the way people did when meals were meant to be savored rather than rushed between meetings. Can I ask you something? Ethan said eventually. Arya tensed. Here it came, the recognition, the moment he'd place her face from some magazine cover or news article. The shift from genuine to calculating. Why did you say yes? To joining us, I mean. That wasn't what she'd expected. I don't know, she said honestly. Your daughter handed me a drawing of a woman with broken wings, and something about it felt true? Ethan offered quietly. Yes. Sophie looked up. Are your wings really broken? Arya set down her fork. She should deflect, should smile and change the subject. Should be the polished, controlled person she'd spent a decade building herself into. I think so, she said instead. I didn't used to notice, but lately I felt like something's missing, like I used to be able to do something important, and now I can't remember what it was. Sophie nodded seriously, like this made perfect sense. Mom said that too, before she got sick. Ethan's hand stilled on his water glass. Arya saw the tightness around his eyes, the way his jaw flexed. I'm sorry, Arya said. Don't be. Ethan's voice was steady, but she heard the effort it took. It's been 2 years. Sophie's learning to talk about it. I don't really remember her face anymore, Sophie said, adding purple flowers to her drawing. But I remember she was sad a lot. Dad says that's because her brain was sick, not because of me. That's right, Bug. Ethan reached over and squeezed his daughter's hand. Nothing that happened was because of you. Arya felt something crack in her chest. This child, this small person with tomato sauce on her face and crayons in her hand, carried a weight no 7-year-old should know. And her father sat beside her, holding her together with quiet words and gentle hands, doing the impossible work of being enough. She would have liked you, Sophie announced, looking at Arya. She always wanted to meet fancy ladies. She said fancy ladies knew secrets about being brave. Sophie, it's okay. Arya surprised herself by reaching across the table, not quite touching Sophie's hand, but close enough. I think your mom was very brave and very loved. She was. Well, Sophie went back to her drawing. That's why it's okay that she's gone. Dad says when you love someone that much, they never really leave. They just change into a different kind of being there. Ethan cleared his throat. That's a loose interpretation of what I said. But it's true, right? Yeah, Bug. It's true. Arya withdrew her hand, picking up her fork again, even though she'd lost her appetite. She didn't belong here. Didn't belong in this moment of raw honesty and unguarded grief. She lived in a world of contracts and calculated risks, where emotions were leveraged and weaknesses exploited. This family, with their honest words and gentle touches, existed in a different universe entirely. And yet she didn't want to leave. What about you? Sophie asked. Do you have someone who loves you that much? Sophie, you can't just... It's all right. Arya set down her fork. No, I don't think I do. Why not? Sophie, I'm busy, Arya said. I work a lot, and when you work as much as I do, there's not much time left for other things. Sophie frowned. That sounds lonely. It is, Arya admitted. Very lonely. She hadn't meant to say it. The words just came out, pulled by the strange gravity of this child's honesty. Ethan was looking at her now with something that might have been recognition, not of her face or name, but of the thing she carried. The weight, the isolation that came from standing at the top of a mountain you'd climbed alone. You could fix that, Sophie said matter-of-factly. Just stop working so much. Arya smiled, but it felt sad. It's not that simple. Why not? Because she struggled for words a 7-year-old would understand. Because the work is what makes me important. Without it, I'm just nothing. Ethan leaned forward. That's not true. You don't know me. No, he agreed. But I know that anyone who thinks they're only worth what they produce is carrying someone else's lie. The words hit her like a physical blow. Arya felt her breath catch, her carefully maintained composure slipping. Who the hell was this carpenter with sawdust probably still in his truck and wisdom that cut through her defenses like they were made of paper? My dad's really smart, Sophie said proudly. He reads lots of books. I can see that. Arya's voice came out rough. The waiter appeared to clear their plates. Arya hadn't finished her pasta, but she didn't object when he took it away. Ethan ordered tiramisu for Sophie and coffee for himself. He didn't ask Arya what she wanted, just included her in the assumption that she'd stay. She should leave. Should thank them for the company and return to her empty penthouse and the work that was waiting. Should rebuild the walls this strange evening had somehow dismantled. I'll have coffee too, she heard herself say. Black. When the waiter left, Sophie slid out of the booth. I need to wash my hands. They're sticky. I'll come with you, Bug. I'm 7. I can go to the bathroom by myself. Ethan hesitated. Arya could see the calculation happening. The restaurant was upscale and safe. The bathrooms were visible from their booth. Sophie was responsible beyond her years. But he was still a single father, still someone who had learned to expect disaster. Go, Arya said. I'll watch from here. He looked at her, surprised. I don't have kids, Arya continued, but I understand not wanting to let them out of your sight. I'll keep an eye on the bathroom door. Something in Ethan's face softened. Thank you. Sophie skipped off toward the restrooms, her uneven ponytail bouncing. Arya tracked her movement, watching until the girl disappeared through the door marked with a small brass silhouette. She likes you, Ethan said. She doesn't know me. Kids are good at seeing people. Better than adults, usually. He leaned back against the booth. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone harder, maybe? You have this presence, like you're used to being in charge. I am used to being in charge. I believe it. He smiled slightly. But you're also sitting in a booth with a stranger and his daughter, eating pasta you probably didn't want, looking more relaxed than you did when I first saw you. Arya wanted to argue, but couldn't. He was right. The tightness in her shoulders had eased. The constant mental checklist of things to manage and control had quieted. For the first time in months, maybe years, she was simply present in a moment without trying to optimize it. "Why did you really invite us to join you?" Ethan asked. "I told you, I don't know." "Try." Arya turned her water glass in slow circles, watching the light catch in the condensation. "When I saw you two earlier, before Sophie came over, you looked happy. Not the kind of happy people perform for others. Just content. Like you were exactly where you wanted to be, even if where you were wasn't particularly special." "It wasn't. We come here once a month as a treat. Sophie loves the breadsticks." "But you were happy." "We were," Ethan agreed. "We are. I couldn't remember the last time I felt that way. And then Sophie handed me that drawing, and it felt like she could see something about me that I'd been trying to hide, even from myself." "The broken wings." "Yes." Ethan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "Can I ask what broke them?" Arya didn't answer right away. She watched Sophie emerge from the bathroom, stopping to examine a painting on the wall. The girl stood on her tiptoes, squinting at it with the intense focus of someone trying to understand something just beyond their reach. "Everything," Arya said finally. "Nothing. I don't know. I spent so long building my life into exactly what I wanted it to be. And somewhere along the way, I forgot what I actually wanted. I just kept building because that's what I knew how to do. And now I have everything, and it all feels empty." "That's not nothing. That's grief." She looked at him sharply. "Grief for what?" "For the person you might have been if you hadn't had to become this one." The word settled over her like a weight, or maybe like wings, heavy and unfamiliar, but somehow right. Sophie bounced back to the table. "That painting is weird. Why would someone paint a bowl of dead fish?" "It's a still life, Bug. It's still dead fish." The coffee arrived along with Sophie's tiramisu. The girl attacked it with the enthusiasm of someone who didn't get dessert often. Arya sipped her coffee, letting the bitter warmth ground her. "So what do you do?" Ethan asked. "Besides run companies and have terrible blind dates." "That's most of it, actually." Arya smiled slightly. "I buy struggling businesses, restructure them, and sell them for profit. Or keep them, if they're interesting enough." "Sounds intense." "It is, but it's also simple. There are rules, variables you can control, outcomes you can predict. Unlike people." "Exactly. Must get lonely, though, living in a world where everything can be controlled." Arya didn't answer, couldn't answer. Sophie looked up from her dessert, a smudge of mascarpone on her chin. "Do you like your job?" "I'm good at it." "That's not what I asked." Out of the mouths of babes, Arya thought. "No," she admitted. "Not anymore. I used to, or I thought I did. Now I'm not sure I know the difference." "You should quit," Sophie announced. "That's what Dad did. He had a mean boss who yelled, so he quit and started his own company. Now he's happy." "It's a little more complicated than that, Bug." "Why?" "If something makes you sad, stop doing it." Ethan laughed. If only adult life worked that way. But Sophie was looking at Arya with those two serious eyes again, and Arya felt the weight of the question. Why couldn't it be that simple? She had enough money to never work again. She could walk away tomorrow, retire at 30, do anything she wanted. Except she didn't know what she wanted. That was the problem. Work had defined her for so long that without it, she didn't know who she was. "I'll think about it," Arya said, and meant it. Sophie grinned and went back to her tiramisu. They sat there for another 20 minutes, talking about nothing important. Sophie showed Arya her folder of drawings, fantastical creatures and impossible buildings, and one very detailed portrait of a dog she wanted, but her dad said they couldn't afford yet. Ethan told a story about a client who had insisted on installing a door that opened into a wall, then blamed him when it didn't work. Arya found herself laughing, really laughing, until her cheeks hurt. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this light. The restaurant was starting to empty out. Ethan checked his watch, an old digital thing that had probably been outdated when he bought it, and winced. "We should get going. It's past someone's bedtime." I'm not tired, Sophie protested, yawning immediately after. Clearly, Ethan caught the waiter's attention, signaling for the check. When it arrived, Arya reached for it automatically. Ethan's hand covered hers. Please don't, he said quietly. It's just dinner. No, it's not. His voice was gentle but firm. You joined us, not the other way around. And I can't let you pay just because you can afford it more easily. Pride. Arya recognized it because she carried the same thing, just in a different package. She withdrew her hand. At least let me get the dessert and coffee. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Fair enough. They split the check awkwardly, both of them careful not to let their hands touch again. Sophie was already sliding out of the booth, clutching her folder of drawings. Wait, she said, pulling out a fresh napkin and a crayon. She drew quickly, sloppy and rushed but unmistakable. 3 stick figures, a tall one with long hair, a medium one, a small one with curly hair. They were holding hands, and above them, a simple sun smiled down. Sophie folded the napkin and pressed it into Arya's hand. So you remember, she said. Remember what? That broken wings can get fixed. You just need people to help hold you up while they heal. Arya's throat tightened. She looked at the napkin, at this child's simple drawing of a moment that shouldn't have meant anything but somehow meant everything. Thank you, she managed. They walked out together, an unlikely trio emerging into the cool night air. Ethan's truck was parked in the back lot, a beat-up Ford with Cole Carpentry painted on the side in letters that had probably been steady once, but were now peeling. Sophie climbed into her booster seat, already yawning again. Arya stood on the sidewalk, her heels clicking against the pavement. Her own car, a sleek black Mercedes that cost more than Ethan probably made in a year, was parked near the entrance in the spot the valet had assigned her. This was where it ended, where she thanked them and walked back to her life, carrying nothing but 2 napkin drawings and a strange ache in her chest. But she didn't want it to end. I don't do this, she said abruptly. Ethan paused, one hand on his truck door. Do what? Connect with people. Let them see me. I've built my entire life around being untouchable, and in one evening, you and your daughter somehow got through every defense I have. She laughed, but it came out shaky. I don't even know your last name. Cole, he said. Ethan Cole. And your area? She should tell him, should say her full name and watch recognition dawn in his eyes. Should let reality crash back in. Just Arya, she said instead. He nodded slowly, understanding what she wasn't saying. Just Arya who runs companies and has broken wings. And you're just Ethan who builds houses and raises a daughter who sees too much. She gets that from her mom. His voice went soft. Emma was like that too, could read people in a heartbeat. She must have been remarkable. She was. He was quiet for a moment. This was nice, unexpected, but nice. It was. They stood there in the parking lot, neither quite willing to be the first to leave. Sophie's head was already drooping against her car seat. Arya knew she should go, should walk away before the strange evening turned into something more complicated. Instead, she pulled out one of her business cards, not the official ones with her title and company name, the personal ones she'd had made on a whim years ago and never used. Simple, elegant, just her first name and a phone number. In case you or Sophie ever need anything, she said, holding it out. Ethan took it, his calloused fingers brushing hers. Why would we need anything? I don't know. But I'd like to think that if you did, you might call. He looked at the card, then at her. This isn't how your world usually works, is it? No. Mine either. And yet here we are. Here we are, he agreed. Arya stepped back. The night air was cooler now, raising goosebumps on her arms. She should feel ridiculous standing in a parking lot at 10 p.m., giving her number to a carpenter she'd known for 2 hours. Should feel exposed and foolish and all the things she'd spent years learning not to feel. Instead, she felt lighter, like something heavy she'd been carrying had finally been set down. Thank you, she said, for letting me crash your dinner, for not asking who I am, or what I do, or why I was sitting alone in an expensive restaurant looking miserable. Thank you for seeing us as just people, not a project or a charity case or a story to tell at your next business dinner. I would never... I know, Ethan said. That's why I'm thanking you. Sophie stirred in the back seat, mumbling something about rainbows. Ethan glanced back at her, and Arya saw the shift in his posture, the father taking over from the man. The person who had responsibilities and couldn't linger in parking lots with strange women, no matter how nice the evening had been. "I should get her home," he said. "Of course." He climbed into the truck, and Arya heard the engine turn over with a rough cough before settling into a steady rumble. She stepped back as he pulled out of the parking space, raising one hand in a wave. Sophie woke up enough to press her palm against the window, and Arya waved back, watching as the truck pulled away, taillights disappearing around the corner. Then she was alone. She stood there for a long moment, holding 2 napkin drawings and a business card that didn't have her last name on it. The restaurant was closing behind her, staff cleaning tables and dimming lights. The parking lot emptied. The night deepened, but Arya didn't feel empty anymore. She walked to her Mercedes, slid into the leather seat, and sat there in the darkness. She looked at the first drawing, the woman with broken wings. Then the second. 3 stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. Something in her chest cracked open, not breaking, shifting. She thought about going home to her penthouse, to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that never slept, to the silence that had become so normal she'd stopped noticing it, to the emails waiting and the calls to return and the empire that demanded her constant attention. And for the first time in 10 years, she wondered if any of it actually mattered. Her phone buzzed, her COO sending through documents that needed signing by morning. "Urgent," the subject line read. "Always urgent. Always demanding. Always there." Arya set the phone down without opening the email. She started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, but instead of turning toward her building, she found herself driving in the opposite direction. Through neighborhoods she'd never explored. Past houses with lights in the windows and lives being lived inside them. Past playgrounds and corner stores and all the ordinary pieces of a world she'd stopped being part of somewhere along the way. She drove until the city thinned out and the streets grew quieter, until she found a small park with empty benches and walked out into the night air, carrying nothing but 2 napkin drawings. The first one, she studied closely. The woman with broken wings. Sophie had drawn the breaks with careful detail. Not violent tears, but gradual fractures. Cracks that had formed slowly, over time, from carrying too much weight for too long. The second drawing she held up to catch the streetlight. 3 figures. A family that wasn't a family. A moment of connection that shouldn't have meant anything, but it did mean something. It meant everything. Because for 2 hours, Arya Bennett had sat in a restaurant booth and let a 7-year-old child and her carpenter father see her. Really see her. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, not the woman who built empires and commanded rooms, just Arya. With broken wings and an empty life and a desperate, aching need for something real. And they hadn't tried to fix her, hadn't offered solutions or advice or the empty platitudes she'd heard 1,000 times before. They'd just sat with her, shared their pasta, told their stories, existed beside her without expecting anything in return. She sat on the bench until her phone buzzed again. Then 6 more times in rapid succession, her team wondering where she was, her assistant asking if everything was okay, her lawyers needing decisions that apparently couldn't wait. Arya turned off her phone. She sat there in the silence, real silence, not the white noise of her penthouse or the calculated quiet of boardrooms, and let herself feel the weight of what she'd built. The empire that had cost her everything. The success that had left her hollow, the wings that had broken under the weight of flying too high, too fast, too alone. And for the first time in years, Arya let herself cry. Not quiet, elegant tears, not the controlled emotion she'd perfected for moments when showing vulnerability served a strategic purpose. These were ugly, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Years of loneliness and pressure and isolation pouring out in a park she'd never been to, witnessed by no one but the empty benches and distant stars. When she finally stopped, her face was wet, and her throat was raw, and her perfect makeup was ruined. She felt lighter than she had in a decade. Arya pulled out her phone, turned it back on, and watched the notifications flood in. Dozens of them, all urgent, all demanding, all expecting her to be the person she'd built herself into. Efficient, tireless, always available. She opened her email and began typing. To all departments, I will be unavailable for the next 72 hours. Direct all urgent matters to COO. Everything else can wait. AB. She hit send before she could second guess herself. Then she pulled up her assistant's contact and sent another message. Claire, you were right. I did need to get out more. Taking a few days off. Cover for me. We'll explain later. The responses started coming in immediately. Confusion, concern, barely concealed panic. Aria Bennett didn't take days off. Aria Bennett didn't go unavailable. Aria Bennett was a machine that ran on coffee and ambition and the desperate need to prove she was worth something. But tonight, sitting on a bench in an empty park, holding drawings made by a child who had somehow seen straight through her, Aria Bennett wasn't a machine. She was just a woman with broken wings, trying to remember how to be human. She drove home slowly, taking streets she'd never traveled, seeing her city like it was the first time. When she finally pulled into her building's parking garage, it was past midnight. The doorman looked surprised to see her, unused to her coming home at any hour that couldn't be categorized as late night working or early morning working. Good evening, Ms. Bennett, he said. Good evening, Marcus. He blinked. She'd never used his name before. Aria rode the elevator to the penthouse, walked through her perfectly decorated, professionally cleaned, utterly soulless apartment, and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows that showed her the city she'd conquered. It looked different from up here. Distant, separated by glass and height, and all the careful distance she'd built between herself and the rest of humanity. She thought about Ethan's truck with the peeling paint, and Sophie's crayon drawings, and the cheap pasta they'd shared like it was the best meal in the world. She thought about what it felt like to be seen. And in the silence of her empty penthouse, with 2 napkin drawings pressed against her chest, Aria Bennett finally let herself imagine a different kind of life. One where she wasn't defined by what she built or controlled or achieved. One where broken wings could heal. One where 3 stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun wasn't just a child's drawing, but a possibility. She didn't know if she was brave enough to reach for it, but standing there in the darkness, with the whole city spread out below her and emptiness spread out inside her, Aria knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was tired of flying alone. The morning came too early and too bright. Aria woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to cover. Her body sprawled across the couch, still wearing yesterday's dress. Her phone sat on the coffee table, silent for the first time in years. She'd turned off all notifications before falling asleep at 3 a.m., and the absence of constant buzzing felt both liberating and terrifying. The 2 napkin drawings sat beside her phone, slightly crumpled from where she'd clutched them through the night. She picked up the one with the broken wings, studying it in the harsh morning light. Sophie's purple crayon had pressed hard in some places, light in others, creating depth that shouldn't have been possible from a 7-year-old's hand. The breaks in the wings weren't symmetrical. One side had more damage than the other, like the woman had been fighting to stay airborne even as she fell. Aria traced the lines with her finger and wondered when exactly she'd started falling. Her apartment looked different in daylight. Sterile, the kind of space that appeared in architecture magazines with captions about minimalist luxury and modern design. Everything in its place. Nothing out of order. No signs that an actual human being lived here. She'd paid an interior designer $40,000 to make it look like this. The thought made her laugh, a short, bitter sound that echoed off the marble floors. Her phone stayed silent. 72 hours, she'd told them. 3 days of being unreachable. Already she could feel the pressure building, emails piling up, decisions being delayed, her carefully constructed empire running on autopilot while she sat on her couch in a wrinkled dress, staring at a child's drawing. What the hell was she doing? Aria stood, her body protesting after a night on the couch. She walked to the kitchen and made coffee, going through the motions automatically. The machine was top of the line, imported from Italy, capable of producing 17 different types of espresso drinks. She pressed the button for plain black coffee and watched it drip into a cup that probably cost more than Ethan's weekly grocery budget. Ethan, Sophie, the strange, impossible evening that had cracked something open inside her. She should forget about it, should chalk it up to a moment of weakness brought on by being stood up and feeling sorry for herself, should throw away the napkin drawings and get back to work and pretend her life was fine. Instead, she called Claire. "Oh, thank God," her assistant answered on the first ring. "I've been fielding calls since 6 a.m. Everyone thinks you've either died or finally had a nervous breakdown. Where are you? Home. Are you sick? No. Then what? I need you to do something for me, Arya interrupted, and I need you to not ask questions. There was a pause. Claire had worked for her for 5 years, had seen her through acquisitions and lawsuits and hostile takeovers without blinking, but this was new territory. Okay, Claire said carefully. What do you need? I need you to clear my calendar for the rest of the week. The whole week? Arya, you have the Singapore investors flying in on Thursday and the board meeting on Friday, and postpone them. I can't just postpone. You can, and you will. Arya's voice came out sharper than intended. She took a breath. Please, Claire, I'm asking you to trust me. Another pause. Longer this time. Are you okay? Claire's voice had shifted from professional to genuinely concerned. Like, really okay? Arya looked at the napkin drawings on her coffee table. I don't know, but I need to find out. This is about the blind date, isn't it? I'm going to kill my cousin. I told him David was a flaky piece of... It's not about David, Arya cut her off. It's about me. I need a few days. She could hear Claire typing in the background, probably already rearranging the carefully orchestrated chaos that was Arya's schedule. Fine, Claire said, but you owe me an explanation, and possibly a raise. Done. Both? Both. After they hung up, Arya stood in her kitchen holding her coffee and staring at nothing. She'd just blown up a week of critical meetings. She'd probably cost the company millions in delayed deals. Her board would demand answers she didn't have, and she felt absolutely nothing about any of it. That scared her more than anything else. She spent the morning doing things she couldn't remember the last time she'd done. She took a long shower without checking her email. She made herself breakfast, actual breakfast, not just coffee gulped down while reviewing reports. She sat on her balcony and watched the city move below her, all those people going about their lives without needing her approval or input or carefully calculated decisions. By noon, the silence was driving her crazy. She picked up the business card Ethan had taken from her, the one with just her name and number. Had he kept it? Thrown it away? Shown it to Sophie and laughed about the weird rich lady who crashed their dinner? Before she could overthink it, Arya grabbed her keys and headed for the door. She didn't have a destination in mind. Just drove, letting instinct guide her through neighborhoods she'd never explored despite living in the city for a decade. The streets grew narrower, the buildings shorter. She passed parks where kids played and corner stores with hand-painted signs, and all the messy, vibrant life that existed outside her carefully controlled bubble. She found herself in a part of town she didn't recognize, where the houses were older and the yards actually had grass instead of decorative gravel. Some had toys scattered on front porches. Others had gardens that looked tended by people who actually cared about what grew there, not landscaping companies paid to maintain an aesthetic. And then she saw it. A beat-up Ford truck with Cole Carpentry painted on the side, parked in the driveway of a small blue house with white trim and shutters that could use a fresh coat of paint. Arya's hands tightened on the steering wheel. This was crazy. She couldn't just show up at his house. She didn't even know for sure this was his house. There were probably multiple Cole Carpenters in the city. And even if it was him, what was she going to say? Thanks for dinner? I've been having an existential crisis ever since. She should drive away, right now, before anyone saw her. The front door opened and Sophie came running out, chasing a yellow butterfly across the lawn. Arya's foot hit the brake before her brain caught up. Sophie spotted the car immediately. Her eyes went wide, and then she was running toward the Mercedes, waving her arms like Arya might not see her. "You came!" Sophie shouted, her voice carrying across the quiet street. "Dad! Dad! She came!" Too late to run now. Arya pulled into the driveway behind the truck, her sleek Mercedes looking absurdly out of place next to Ethan's work vehicle. She turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, wondering what the hell she was doing. Sophie appeared at her window, pressing her face against the glass. "Are you coming out, or are you going to sit in there forever?" Arya opened the door. Sophie immediately grabbed her hand and started pulling her toward the house. "You have to see my room. I finished the drawing of you with the wings. Well, I started a new one. The old one wasn't good enough." "Sophie, let her breathe." Ethan was standing on the porch, wearing jeans and a t-shirt covered in sawdust. He looked as surprised to see her as she felt being here. I wasn't sure you'd actually use that number. I didn't, Arya said. I was driving, and I saw your truck, and you're here. I'm here. They stood there looking at each other while Sophie bounced impatiently between them. Arya felt ridiculous in her designer jeans and cashmere sweater, standing in a driveway that had grass growing through the cracks. Do you want to come in? Ethan asked. I was just making lunch, nothing fancy, just sandwiches. I don't want to intrude. You drove all the way here, might as well intrude properly. He smiled, and some of the tension eased. Besides, Sophie will never forgive me if I let you leave without showing you her art gallery. It's on the fridge, Sophie announced proudly. All my best drawings, come on! She pulled Arya up the porch steps and through the front door. The house was small, maybe a third the size of Arya's penthouse. The furniture was mismatched but comfortable looking. Children's books were stacked on every available surface. Crayon drawings covered the walls in a chaos of color that should have looked messy, but somehow just looked alive. It was the most welcoming space Arya had ever been in. See? Sophie dragged her to the kitchen, pointing at a refrigerator covered in artwork held up by magnets shaped like various tools. This is from last week, and this is from yesterday. And this one I made this morning after Dad said maybe you'd call, but probably not, because rich people are busy. Sophie, Ethan warned. What? That's what you said. I said she probably had a lot going on. That's different. Arya studied the drawings. They were all variations on themes she was starting to recognize. Families, houses, animals, fantastical creatures with impossible features. But there, in the corner, was a new one. The woman with broken wings again. But this time the wings weren't just broken. They were being held together by two other figures, one tall and one small, their stick figure hands reaching up to support the damaged parts. That's us helping you, Sophie explained, following her gaze, because broken things can be fixed if people help. Arya's throat tightened. It's beautiful. You can have it if you want. I'll make a new one. Before Arya could respond, Sophie had already pulled the drawing off the fridge and pressed it into her hands. Ethan was at the counter, pulling bread and cold cuts from a refrigerator that had definitely seen better days. Turkey okay? Or I think we have some peanut butter if you're vegetarian, or turkey's fine. Arya set the drawing carefully on the kitchen table, which was scarred with years of use and covered in what looked like homework papers and more crayons. Can I help? Do you know how to make a sandwich? I've made it to 30 without starving. I think I can handle basic food assembly. He grinned and tossed her the mayo. Be my guest. They worked in comfortable silence, falling into an easy rhythm that shouldn't have been possible between two people who barely knew each other. Ethan cut vegetables while Arya spread condiments. Sophie sat at the table, already starting a new drawing. So, Ethan said eventually, not that I'm not happy to see you, but why are you here? Arya focused very intently on spreading mayo evenly across bread. I took the week off work. The whole week? First time in 8 years. Wow. He paused mid-tomato slice. What are you going to do with all that free time? I have no idea. She set down the knife and looked at him. I've spent the last decade building a life that runs like a machine. Wake up, work, sleep, repeat. And yesterday, sitting with you and Sophie, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I did something just because I wanted to. Not because it was strategic or necessary or good for business, just because. And you wanted to come here? Apparently. Sophie looked up from her drawing. Are you going to live with us now? Sophie, I'm just asking. She said she doesn't know what to do, and we have a guest room. Well, it's Dad's office, but there's a couch. I'm not moving in, Arya said quickly. I don't know. I needed to see if last night was real, if you were real. Ethan set down the knife. As opposed to what? As opposed to something I imagined because I was lonely and desperate and pathetic. You're not pathetic. I'm a 30-year-old billionaire who showed up uninvited at a stranger's house because I can't figure out how to be a person. Arya laughed, but it came out shaky. That feels pretty pathetic. You're a person who's trying to find connection in a world that taught you connection was weakness. Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. That's not pathetic. That's brave. Sophie nodded seriously. Dad cried for like a month after Mom died. He says that was brave too. Sophie? What? You did. I heard you at night when you thought I was sleeping. Ethan's face flushed. We're going to talk about boundaries later, Bug. You're the one who said honesty is important. There's honesty, and then there's... He stopped, taking a breath. You know what? Never mind. Yes, I cried. A lot. Because losing someone you love is hard, and pretending it isn't doesn't help anyone. Arya watched them, this father and daughter who spoke about pain like it was just another part of life, not something to hide or overcome or push through with sheer force of will. Just something that existed, that needed acknowledgement and space. I don't think I've cried in front of another person since I was 12, Arya said quietly. Why not? Sophie asked. Because crying meant losing control. And people who lose control lose everything else too. That's sad. Yes, Arya agreed. It is. They finished making sandwiches and carried them to the small kitchen table. Ethan cleared away the homework and crayons, stacking them on a nearby counter with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. They sat, the three of them, in chairs that didn't match, eating sandwiches on plates that had chips in the edges. Arya took a bite. It was just turkey and cheese and some vegetables. Nothing special, nothing that would ever appear on a menu at the restaurants she frequented. It tasted like the best thing she'd eaten in years. So what's your plan? Ethan asked. For the week, you must have something in mind. Not really. Arya set down her sandwich. I've spent so long planning every minute of every day that the idea of unstructured time is kind of terrifying. You should come to my soccer game tomorrow, Sophie said through a mouthful of bread. We're terrible, but it's fun. Dad says fun is more important than winning. I say that after you lose, Ethan corrected. When you win, I say winning is pretty great too. Can you come? Sophie looked at Arya with those impossibly earnest eyes. I don't know anything about soccer. Zoe, neither do most of the parents. They just stand on the sidelines and yell, good job, even when we kick the ball backwards. Arya found herself smiling. What time? Really? Sophie bounced in her seat. Really? Really? Really, really. 10 a.m. at Riverside Park, Ethan said. He was watching Arya with an expression she couldn't quite read. You don't have to come if you don't want to. Sophie gets excited easily, but she'll understand if I want to, Arya interrupted. I think I do. I'm not great with kids or sports or people in general, really, but I'd like to try. Okay then. Ethan's expression shifted into something that might have been relief. Fair warning, the other parents are going to have questions. We're not exactly in the same social circles. I'll tell them I'm your girlfriend, Sophie announced. You will absolutely not tell them that, Ethan said firmly. Fine. I'll say she's my friend, which is true. We are friends, right? She looked at Arya for confirmation. Arya thought about all the people she knew, business associates, professional contacts, people who wanted something from her or wanted to be seen with her or wanted to use her connections, people who would drop her the second she stopped being useful. Yes, she said. We're friends. Sophie grinned and went back to her sandwich, apparently satisfied. They talked through lunch about nothing important. Sophie told Arya about school and her teacher who had a funny laugh, and the boy who pulled her hair. But Dad said that meant he liked her. But that was stupid, because why would you hurt people you like? Ethan talked about his current project, a kitchen renovation for a couple who couldn't agree on anything and kept changing their minds mid-construction. Arya found herself telling stories about her work too, but different ones than she usually told. Not the victories and acquisitions, but the absurd moments. The time a CEO threw a stapler during a negotiation. The company mascot that was inexplicably a dancing pickle. The lawyer who spoke only in sports metaphors, even though no one understood what he meant. She was laughing, really laughing, when her phone buzzed in her pocket. The sound cut through the easy atmosphere like a knife. Arya pulled it out, saw her COO's name on the screen, and felt reality crash back in. She started. Go ahead, Ethan said. We'll clean up. Arya stepped out onto the porch, answering as the door closed behind her. Richard, This better be important. The Singapore deal is falling apart. Richard's voice was tense. They're threatening to pull out unless you personally guarantee the transition timeline. They won't talk to anyone but you. Arya leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the quiet street. Tell them I'll call them Monday. Monday? Arya, they're walking in 24 hours if we don't. Then let them walk. Silence on the other end. She could practically hear Richard's brain short-circuiting. I'm sorry, did you just say let them walk? This is a $60 million deal. You've been working on it for 6 months. I know what it is. Then why? Because I'm taking the week off, Richard. I told everyone that. If they can't wait until Monday, they weren't serious partners anyway. Arya, I don't know what's going on with you, but this isn't like you. You don't just walk away from... Maybe I should have walked away a long time ago. She kept her voice calm even though her heart was racing. Handle it, or don't. Either way, I'm not available until Monday. She hung up before he could respond. Her hands were shaking. She'd just potentially torpedoed a deal that represented months of work and millions in revenue. She should feel panicked. Should call Richard back and fix it. Should be the person everyone expected her to be. Instead, she felt lighter. The door opened behind her. Ethan stepped out, holding a glass of water. Everything okay? I might have just destroyed a major business deal. On purpose? Kind of. He handed her the water. She hadn't realized how thirsty she was until she took a sip. Want to talk about it? He asked. Not really. She set down the glass on the porch railing. Can I ask you something instead? Sure. How do you do it? The whole being present thing. Sophie's clearly the center of your world, but you don't seem stressed or overwhelmed or like you're one missed payment away from falling apart. How do you make it look so easy? Ethan laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Easy. Arya, I'm broke, like actually broke. I took out a second mortgage to keep the business afloat last year, and I'm still not sure I'm going to make it. Half the time I'm feeding Sophie mac and cheese from a box because it's all I can afford. I lie awake at night terrified that I'm failing her, that she deserves better than a dad who can't even afford to fix the shutters on their house. Arya stared at him. But yesterday, at the restaurant, yesterday was our monthly treat. Something I save for because Sophie loves it and because I remember what it felt like when Emma and I used to go to nice places back before everything fell apart. He ran a hand through his hair. You think I look put together? I'm barely holding on. I'm just better at hiding it than you are. I don't believe that. Why not? Because Sophie is happy. Really, genuinely happy. Kids can't fake that. No, Ethan agreed. They can't. But you know what? She's happy because I decided that even if I couldn't give her everything, I could give her presence. I could show up. I could listen. I could let her see me struggle and cry and fail and get back up again. That's not easy. That's the hardest thing I've ever done. Arya absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. I've spent my whole life trying to be strong, to never let anyone see weakness. And you're saying the strongest thing you've done is let your daughter see you fall apart? I'm saying strength isn't about never falling. It's about falling and letting people help you back up. He looked at her steadily. You came here today because you're falling and you don't know how to ask for help. So I'm telling you, it's okay to fall. It's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to be a mess. I'm not a mess. Arya, you showed up at a stranger's house because a 7-year-old drew you a picture. You're absolutely a mess, and that's okay. She wanted to argue, wanted to defend herself, to explain that she was just having a momentary lapse, that she'd be fine once she figured things out. Instead, she heard herself say, I don't know who I am without my work. Then maybe it's time to find out. Sophie poked her head through the door. Are you guys done talking about serious stuff? Because I want to show Arya my treehouse. Well, it's not really a treehouse. It's more like a platform in a tree. But Dad built it, and it's cool. Can I see it? Arya asked. Sophie's face lit up. Really? Really? They spent the afternoon in the backyard, which was small but full of life, in a way Arya's sterile penthouse balcony could never be. The treehouse was exactly as Sophie described, a simple platform with railings built into the branches of an old oak, but Sophie showed it off like it was a castle. Dad made it extra safe, she explained as they climbed the ladder. Because Mom wasn't there to tell him if he did it wrong, so he built it like 5 times stronger than it needed to be. That sounds like your dad, Arya said. From the platform, you could see over the fence into neighboring yards. Kids played, adults gardened, normal life happening in normal ways. Do you like it up here? Sophie asked. I do. Me too. When I'm sad about Mom, I come up here and talk to the birds. They don't say anything back, but it feels like they're listening. Arya sat on the platform, her expensive jeans getting dirty on the unfinished wood. What do you tell them? Mostly that I miss her, and that I wish I could remember her better, and that Dad is sad sometimes, even though he tries to hide it. Sophie picked at a splinter in the wood. Do you think she can hear me? From wherever she is? The question hit Arya like a punch. She thought about all the easy platitudes she could offer, the comforting lies people told children. I don't know, she said honestly, but I think talking about her keeps her alive in a different way, in your memories, in your dad's stories, in the love you still feel even though she's gone. Sophie considered this. That's what Dad says too, except he uses bigger words. Your dad is very smart. I know, he reads a lot. Sophie leaned against the railing, looking out at the neighborhood. Are you going to be our friend for real, or just for today? What's the difference? Real friends don't leave. They stick around even when things get hard or boring or weird. Arya thought about her answer carefully. I want to be a real friend, but I'm not very good at it. I might mess up. That's okay. Dad messes up all the time. Yesterday, he put salt in his coffee instead of sugar and didn't notice until he took a drink. How did I miss that? You were in the bathroom with me, remember? He spit it out in the sink. It was really funny. They sat there as the afternoon stretched long, talking about everything and nothing. Sophie showed her the bird's nest in the next branch over and the place where she'd carved her initials, badly, and the specific spot where the sun came through the leaves just right. Ethan called up eventually. Dinner in 30 minutes if you want to stay. Arya should leave. She'd already imposed enough. But when she looked at Sophie's hopeful face, she found herself saying, What's for dinner? Spaghetti, from a jar. Nothing fancy. That sounds perfect. But dinner was chaos in the best way. Sophie spilled sauce on her shirt and had to change. Ethan burned the garlic bread but served it anyway. They ate at the same scarred kitchen table, and Arya found herself telling stories about her childhood, things she hadn't thought about in years. Growing up in a small apartment with parents who worked 3 jobs between them, learning to make herself invisible so she wouldn't be a burden, building her first company at 23 with money borrowed from people who thought she'd fail. Why did they think you'd fail? Sophie asked. Because I was young and a woman, and I didn't come from money or have fancy degrees or know the right people. But you didn't fail. No, I worked harder than everyone else and proved them wrong. Is that why you work all the time now? Because you're still trying to prove something? Out of the mouths of babes. Maybe, Arya admitted. After dinner, Sophie insisted on showing Arya every single one of her drawings, stored in a large portfolio that Ethan had apparently made specially for her. There were hundreds of them, chronicling years of a child's evolving view of the world. Arya looked through them all, and Sophie provided commentary on each one. By the time they finished, it was past Sophie's bedtime. She was yawning but fighting it, clearly not wanting the day to end. Time for bed, Bug, Ethan said gently. But Arya's still here. Arya can come visit again, right? He looked at Arya for confirmation. Right, Arya said. I'll be at your soccer game tomorrow, remember? That seemed to satisfy Sophie. She gave Arya a fierce hug that squeezed the air from her lungs, then trudged upstairs with Ethan following to oversee the bedtime routine. Arya stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the comfortable mess of a lived-in home, and felt something settle in her chest. Not happiness, exactly, but maybe the possibility of happiness, the knowledge that it existed and could be reached if she was brave enough to try. Ethan came back down 20 minutes later. She wants you to tuck her in. Me? You. I tried to explain that you probably wanted to leave, but she's very insistent. Arya climbed the stairs to Sophie's room, which was exactly what a 7-year-old's room should be. Toys everywhere, posters of animals and cartoon characters, a bed with mismatched sheets, and about 30 stuffed animals. Sophie was already under the covers, looking small and sleepy. Will you tell me a story? She asked. I don't know any stories. Make one up. Arya sat on the edge of the bed, her mind completely blank. She couldn't remember the last time someone had asked her to tell a story. Couldn't remember if anyone ever had. Once upon a time, she started, and the rest came without planning. There was a woman who forgot how to fly. She had wings once, but she broke them trying to fly too high, too fast, all alone. And after they broke, she convinced herself she didn't need them anyway. Flying was dangerous. Flying meant risking another fall. So she stayed on the ground and told herself she was happy there. Sophie's eyes were already drooping, but she was listening. Then, one day, she met a little girl who could see things other people missed. The girl drew a picture of the woman's broken wings, and suddenly the woman couldn't pretend anymore. She had to admit that she missed flying, that being safe on the ground wasn't the same as being happy. "What happened next?" Sophie mumbled. "I don't know yet. The story isn't finished. Does she learn to fly again?" "Maybe, with help from some friends who don't mind holding her wings together while they heal." Sophie smiled sleepily. "That's a good story." You think so?" But Sophie was already asleep. Arya sat there for a moment, looking at this child who had somehow cracked open her carefully constructed armor in less than 24 hours. Then she stood quietly and left the room, closing the door with a soft click. Ethan was waiting downstairs, 2 mugs of tea on the coffee table. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I wanted to." Arya sat on the couch, accepting the tea. "Thank you for today, for letting me crash your life again." "You didn't crash anything. You were invited." He settled into the other end of the couch. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What are you running from?" Arya wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "What makes you think I'm running?" "Because I know what running looks like. I did it for a year after Emma died. Different city, new start, convinced myself I could outrun grief. Didn't work." "What made you stop?" "Sophie. She asked me one day why we kept moving, and I realized I was teaching her that when things hurt, you run. I didn't want that for her." He looked at Arya steadily. "So what are you running from?" "Success, I think. Or maybe the person I had to become to achieve it." She took a sip of tea. It was too hot and slightly bitter, nothing like the perfect temperature-controlled beverages she usually drank. She loved it. "I've spent 10 years building an empire, and somewhere along the way, the empire became all I was. Arya Bennett, CEO. Arya Bennett, billionaire. Arya Bennett, who closed the impossible deal and saved the failing company and made everyone who doubted her eat their words. But not Arya Bennett, person. I forgot how to be just a person, how to have friends who weren't professional contacts, how to spend time doing something that didn't advance my goals, how to be vulnerable without it being weaponized." She set down the tea. "Your daughter handed me a drawing, and it was like looking in a mirror, all the broken parts I'd been hiding, suddenly visible. And now? Now I'm sitting in a stranger's house, drinking tea, and wondering if it's too late to learn how to be human again." "It's not too late," Ethan said. "It's just hard, especially if you're doing it alone." "I've always done everything alone." "I know, that's the problem." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling with words. Through the window, Arya could see the quiet street, porch lights coming on as evening deepened. This neighborhood, this house, this life. It was so far removed from her world that it might as well have been another planet. And yet here she was, feeling more at home than she had in years. "I should go," she said, even though she didn't want to. "You don't have to." "I know, but Sophie's soccer game is early, and I need to figure out what one wears to a children's sporting event." Ethan laughed. "Jeans and a t-shirt, maybe a jacket. It's not complicated." "Everything is complicated when you've overthought your wardrobe for a decade." He walked her to the door. They stood there awkwardly, neither quite sure how to end the evening. "Thank you," Arya said finally, "for not treating me like I'm crazy." "You're not crazy, you're just figuring things out." "Same thing, maybe." "Maybe." She was halfway to her car when Ethan called out. "Arya?" She turned. "I'm glad you came today. Sophie's glad too. And I think maybe you needed this as much as we did." "What do you mean?" "Sophie's been asking for a mom since Emma died. Not to replace her, but just someone else. Another person to care about us. To show up and I've been so focused on being enough for her that I forgot she might need more than just me." He leaned against the doorframe. "So thank you for being someone she can count on, even if it's just for a soccer game." Arya's throat tightened. "I don't know how to be that person. Nobody does at first. You just show up and try not to mess up too badly." "I'm very good at messing up." "Then you'll fit right in." She drove home slowly, taking the long route through neighborhoods that were coming alive with evening routines, families eating dinner, kids doing homework, people living ordinary lives that somehow seemed extraordinary from the outside. When she finally pulled into her building's garage, the contrast was jarring. Cold concrete, perfect lines, expensive cars that probably spent more time being detailed than being driven. She rode the elevator to her penthouse and walked into her spotless, empty apartment. It had never felt more hollow. Arya stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city she'd conquered. Somewhere out there, in a small blue house with peeling paint, a little girl was sleeping, dreaming about soccer games and rainbow houses and women with broken wings learning to fly again. And somewhere in that same house, a man was probably lying awake, worrying about money and mortgages and whether he was enough for his daughter. They were struggling, barely holding on, one unexpected expense away from disaster, and yet they had something Arya had spent her entire life trying to achieve and never found. They had each other. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through the dozens of missed calls and emails. Everyone wanting something. Everyone demanding her attention, her decisions, her carefully calculated responses. She turned off the phone entirely and went to bed. Tomorrow, she would go to a soccer game. She would cheer for a team that would probably lose. She would stand on the sidelines with parents who had no idea who she was or what she was worth. And maybe, just maybe, she would learn what it felt like to be part of something that mattered for reasons that had nothing to do with profit margins or strategic advantages. Maybe she would learn to be human again. The thought terrified her. But lying in her empty penthouse, clutching a napkin drawing of broken wings being held together by friendship, Arya Bennett finally admitted something she'd been avoiding for 10 years. She was tired of being strong. She was tired of being alone. She was tired of pretending that success was enough to fill the gaping emptiness inside her. And tomorrow, for the first time in her adult life, she was going to try something different. She was going to let people see her fall. Arya stood in front of her closet the next morning, staring at rows of designer clothes that suddenly seemed completely wrong for a children's soccer game. Everything was too formal, too expensive, too obviously her. The version of herself she'd spent a decade building didn't know how to dress for standing on a sideline cheering for 7-year-olds. She finally settled on dark jeans and a simple sweater, the most casual thing she owned that didn't look like she was trying too hard to look casual. Her hands shook slightly as she pulled on sneakers she'd bought 2 years ago and worn exactly once. The drive to Riverside Park took 20 minutes through Saturday morning traffic. Arya spent most of it second-guessing everything. She didn't belong here. She'd probably say the wrong thing or stand in the wrong place or somehow make Sophie's day worse instead of better. The smart thing would be to turn around, go back to her penthouse, and let this strange detour from her real life end before it got more complicated. She kept driving. The park was already crowded when she arrived, minivans and SUVs filling the lot while kids in matching jerseys ran wild across the grass. Arya parked her Mercedes between a dented Honda and a truck with a car seat visible in the back, feeling absurdly conspicuous. She found Sophie's team on the far field, a chaotic cluster of small humans in bright yellow jerseys warming up by essentially just running in circles. Sophie spotted her immediately and came sprinting over, cleats kicking up grass. "You came! You really came! Dad said maybe you'd change your mind, but I knew you wouldn't." "I said maybe she'd be busy," Ethan corrected, walking over with a folding chair under one arm and a cooler in the other hand. He looked tired but genuinely pleased to see her. "I'm glad you made it." "Me too, I think." Arya gestured at the field. "What exactly are the rules of this game?" "Don't touch the ball with your hands unless you're the goalie. Otherwise, chaos." Ethan set down the chair. "Want to sit? Fair warning, the other parents are going to ask questions." "What kind of questions?" "The nosy kind. This is a small league. Everyone knows everyone. A new face tends to cause speculation." Before Arya could respond, a woman in yoga pants and a sweatshirt that said "Soccer Mom" in rhinestones approached with the kind of friendly aggression that immediately put Arya on edge. "Hi, I'm Jennifer, Tyler's mom. I don't think we've met. Arya. She shook the offered hand, noting Jennifer's assessing gaze, taking in her expensive watch and designer jeans. Are you new to the neighborhood? I haven't seen you at any of the team events. She's a friend, Ethan said easily. Just came to watch the game. Oh, how nice. Jennifer's smile sharpened. We're always happy to have support. Are you from the area originally? Arya recognized the question for what it was. A fishing expedition for information. She'd sat through hundreds of similar conversations in boardrooms, just with different words. The game was always the same. I live downtown, she said neutrally. Downtown. That must be quite a commute. The traffic on weekends is terrible. Jennifer's eyes flicked to Ethan, then back to Arya. So, how do you two know each other? We met at a restaurant, Arya said, which was technically true. How lovely. Ethan doesn't get out much since... Jennifer caught herself, glancing at Sophie, who was back on the field practicing kicks. Well, it's nice to see him with company. The underlying message was clear. Everyone knew Ethan was the widowed single dad, and they were all very interested in who might be filling that void. Arya felt a flash of irritation on his behalf. I should go help with warm-ups, Ethan said, clearly sensing the tension. Arya, you okay here? Fine. As he walked away, Jennifer leaned in conspiratorially. He's a good man, really devoted to Sophie. But he works so hard, that carpentry business of his barely keeps them afloat. Sophie mentioned they're behind on some bills. Arya's jaw tightened. Did she? Oh, not in a complaining way. You know how kids are. They don't understand what they're supposed to keep private. I just think it's sweet that he's found someone who seems successful. Her gaze dropped to Arya's watch again. What do you do, if you don't mind me asking? I work in acquisitions. How interesting. What does that involve? Buying things. Arya's tone didn't invite follow-up questions. Jennifer got the hint and drifted away, but not before Arya caught her whispering to another parent. She could see the speculation spreading through the sideline like wildfire. The mysterious woman with expensive clothes watching Ethan's daughter. The gossip would be all over the neighborhood by Monday. The game started with all the organization of a food fight. Kids ran in clusters, occasionally remembering to kick the ball. Parents shouted encouragement that ranged from helpful to completely counterproductive. Sophie played defense, her face scrunched in concentration as she tried to stay between opposing players and the goal. She's actually pretty good, a voice said beside Arya. She turned to find a man about her age, wearing cargo shorts and a t-shirt advertising a local brewery. He had the easy posture of someone completely comfortable in his own skin. I'm Marcus. My daughter Zoe plays forward. He pointed to a girl with braids who had just fallen over her own feet. Well, she tries to play forward. Arya. She shook his hand, grateful for someone who didn't immediately start interrogating her. First game? Is it that obvious? You look like you're watching a hostage situation instead of kids' soccer. He grinned. Don't worry, everyone's nervous their first time. You'll get used to the chaos. They watched in companionable silence as the yellow team, apparently called the Banana Slugs, which explained the mascot on Sophie's jersey, struggled to coordinate their defense. The other team scored twice in quick succession. Don't worry, we're always down at halftime, Marcus said. Coach gives them juice boxes and they rally. Usually. Do they win often? Define often. We won 2 games last season. Out of how many? 12. Arya found herself smiling. Those are terrible odds. Best odds in the league for character building, though. These kids know how to lose with grace. Well, most of them. Tyler over there cries every time, but he's getting better. On the field, Sophie had just stolen the ball from an opposing player and was racing down the sideline. The Banana Slugs' parents erupted in cheers. Ethan was shouting encouragement from the coach's position, his whole face transformed with pride. Sophie passed to a teammate who immediately kicked it in the wrong direction. And that's why we lose, Marcus said cheerfully. At halftime, Sophie ran over, sweaty and grass-stained and beaming. Did you see? I almost scored. You were playing defense, Arya pointed out. Yeah, but I got the ball really far down the field before Jamie messed it up. You were great. Arya meant it. She'd watched board members present million-dollar proposals with less confidence than Sophie showed chasing a soccer ball. We're down 4-0, Sophie announced, but Coach says we're doing great and we just need to remember to pass to our own team. Ethan appeared with juice boxes, handing them out to a cluster of kids. He caught Arya's eye and smiled, a real smile that made something warm unfold in her chest. "You doing okay?" he asked when Sophie ran off to compare grass stains with her teammates. "Better than expected, though I think I'm the subject of intense neighborhood gossip. Jennifer cornered you, didn't she? Is she always that interested in people's lives? She means well. Mostly. She's just bored, and this league is basically her soap opera." He lowered his voice. "For what it's worth, I didn't tell Sophie to keep our financial situation private. She's 7. I can't expect her to understand what's personal." "She shouldn't have to understand that. She's a kid." Arya watched Sophie demonstrate some kind of elaborate celebration dance to Zoe. "Jennifer implied you're struggling." "I am struggling, but that's my problem to solve, not the neighborhood's gossip fodder." He hesitated. "And definitely not something for you to worry about." "What if I want to worry about it?" "You've known us for 2 days." "So?" "So people don't usually get invested that fast unless they want something." The words stung because they were true. In Arya's world, every relationship was transactional. Every connection had an angle. The idea that she might just care about these people without expecting anything in return was so foreign she almost didn't recognize it in herself. "I don't want anything," she said quietly. I like being here, with you and Sophie, watching terrible soccer and dealing with nosy parents. It's the most normal I've felt in years." Ethan studied her face. "Okay. Okay? Okay, I believe you." He smiled slightly. "But if you change your mind and decide you need something, just ask. I'm pretty good at saying no." The second half was marginally better than the first. The Banana Slugs managed to score once, sending their section of parents into wild celebration. Sophie assisted, which meant she kicked the ball to someone who kicked it to someone else who accidentally scored while trying to pass. They still lost 6-1. "That was our best game all season," Coach announced afterward, gathering the dejected but juicebox-fueled team. "Everyone played with heart. I'm proud of you." The kids didn't look particularly consoled, but they lined up to high-five the other team anyway. Sophie came over to where Arya and Ethan stood, her face streaked with dirt. "We lost," she said unnecessarily. "You played well," Arya offered, "but we still lost." Losing doesn't erase playing well. You worked hard, you helped your team, you got better at defense. Those things matter even if the scoreboard doesn't show it. Sophie considered this. "Did you lose a lot when you were building your companies?" "All the time. I lost deals, lost money, lost people I thought I could trust. Some years I lost more than I won." "But you kept trying." "I kept trying." "Then I guess losing's okay if you learn stuff." Sophie brightened. "Can we get ice cream? Dad always says we can get ice cream after games, but sometimes we don't actually go because it's expensive." "Sophie," Ethan started, his face flushing. "I would love ice cream," Arya cut in. "My treat, to celebrate a hard-fought game." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." She met Ethan's eyes. "Please, let me do this one small thing." He looked like he wanted to argue, but Sophie was already bouncing with excitement, and several other kids had overheard and were now begging their parents to join. The protest died in Ethan's throat. "Fine, but we're going to the cheap place, not that fancy gelato shop downtown." "Deal." 20 minutes later, Arya found herself in a strip mall ice cream parlor that probably hadn't been updated since 1995, surrounded by small children and harried parents. The Banana Slugs had taken over 3 tables, and the noise level was approaching jet engine decibels. Sophie ordered a cone with 2 scoops, chocolate and bubblegum, a combination that made Arya's teeth hurt just thinking about it. Ethan got vanilla. Arya got the same, not because she particularly wanted it, but because choosing felt overwhelming in the chaos. They squeezed into a booth with Sophie, who immediately started telling them in excruciating detail about every single play of the game, complete with sound effects. And then Tyler was all, "I got it," but he didn't got it. He missed it completely and fell on his butt. And the ball went whoosh right past. "Breathe, bug," Ethan said. "Your ice cream's melting." Sophie attacked her cone with renewed focus. Arya licked her vanilla and watched the controlled chaos around them. This was what normal looked like. Families doing ordinary things together. No agenda, no networking, just people existing in each other's space, comfortable and loud and messy. Jennifer appeared at their table, Tyler in tow with chocolate smeared across his face. Arya? I didn't realize you'd be joining us. How generous of you to treat the team. Arya hadn't actually offered to treat the whole team, but word had apparently spread and she wasn't about to embarrass anyone by clarifying. They earned it. Tyler, say thank you to Miss Arya. Thank you, Tyler mumbled through a mouthful of cookies and cream. Jennifer lingered, clearly hoping to extract more information. So Arya, you mentioned you work in acquisitions. That must be fascinating. What company? My own. Oh, a business owner. Ethan, did you hear that? Arya owns her own business too. You two have that in common. I'm sure Arya's business is a bit different from mine, Ethan said dryly. Well, yes, but still, it's nice to have things in common. Jennifer smiled in a way that made Arya want to throw her ice cream at her. Tyler's father is in finance. Very demanding career. We hardly see him most weeks. The implication was clear. Successful people didn't have time for soccer games and ice cream parlors. The fact that Arya was here meant either she wasn't actually that successful or she had some other agenda. I made time, Arya said evenly, because this is important. Of course it is. I just meant, Mom, can we go? Tyler interrupted, tugging on Jennifer's sleeve. I want to play video games. Jennifer allowed herself to be dragged away, but not without one more assessing look at Arya. I apologize for her, Ethan said when she was out of earshot. Don't. She's just trying to figure out where I fit in the hierarchy. It's what people do. You say that like you're not people. Sometimes I'm not sure I am. Arya pushed her ice cream around the bowl. In my world, everyone's always calculating. What can you do for me? What can I do for you? How can we both come out ahead? The idea that someone would just show up with no angle is basically incomprehensible. And in our world, people show up because it's Saturday, and we said we would. Sophie had somehow gotten ice cream on her forehead. That's what friends do. Is it that simple? Why shouldn't it be? Ethan asked. Because nothing in Arya's life had ever been that simple. Because every relationship she'd built had been strategic, every connection calculated for maximum advantage. Because the idea that she could just be someone's friend without it meaning anything. Beyond that was so foreign, she didn't know how to process it. But sitting here in this outdated ice cream parlor, watching Sophie try to lick ice cream off her own nose, Arya thought maybe simple wasn't such a bad thing. They were finishing up when Arya's phone buzzed. She'd turned it back on that morning, a concession to the voice in her head that said completely disappearing was irresponsible. The screen showed her lawyer's number. I need to take this, she said. I'll be right back. Outside, she answered. Robert, this better be urgent. The Singapore investors are threatening legal action. They claim you made verbal commitments that you're now reneging on. Arya closed her eyes. I made no such commitments. Their lawyers say otherwise. They want a call by end of business Monday, or they're filing a complaint with the International Trade Commission. Let them. Arya, let them file. We have documentation of every conversation, every email, every meeting. If they want to waste money on lawyers, that's their choice. She kept her voice steady even though her heart was racing. Anything else? Your board wants an emergency meeting. They're concerned about your absence. Tell them I'll be at the scheduled meeting Friday, not before. They're not going to like that. They don't have to like it. They just have to accept it. She paused. Robert, have you ever taken a week off? Of course. Last year we went to Cabo. No, I mean really off. Phone turned off, emails ignored, completely unreachable. That would be irresponsible. Would it? Or would it just be human? Silence on the other end. Are you okay? Everyone keeps asking me that. Because you're acting strange. The Arya Bennett I know doesn't walk away from $60 million deals to go dark for a week. Maybe the Arya Bennett you know needs to change. She hung up before he could respond. When she went back inside, Ethan took one look at her face and said, Bad news? Just work being work. Nothing I can't handle Monday. You don't look like it's nothing. Arya sat down, suddenly exhausted. I might have just let a major deal implode and pissed off my entire board of directors. Sophie's eyes widened. You said a bad word. Sophie, eat your ice cream, Ethan said. Then to Arya. Do you want to talk about it? Not really. I just want to sit here and eat mediocre ice cream and pretend I'm a normal person for a few more hours. You are a normal person. No, I'm really not. But she appreciated the lie. They left the ice cream parlor an hour later, Sophie sticky and happy, and already making Ethan promise they could come back next week. The parking lot was emptying, families loading tired kids into cars, the Saturday afternoon winding down into evening. Arya walked them to Ethan's truck. Sophie was dragging her feet, clearly fighting exhaustion after the game and sugar crash. Thank you for coming, Ethan said as he buckled Sophie into her booster seat. It meant a lot to her, to both of us. Thank you for letting me be part of it. Are you going to be okay? With the work stuff? Honestly, I don't know. Arya looked at her Mercedes, then back at Ethan. I've spent 10 years building something that felt important, and now I'm letting it fall apart because a 7-year-old drew me a picture and made me realize how empty my life is. That's not normal behavior. Maybe not, but maybe normal's overrated. He closed Sophie's door gently. Can I tell you something? Sure. After Emma died, I went a little crazy. Sold our house, moved 3 times in 6 months, took jobs in different cities, convinced myself that if I just found the right place, the pain would stop. He leaned against the truck. It didn't stop. It just followed me. And one day Sophie looked at me and said, Dad, I'm tired of new houses. Can we just pick one and stay? And I realized I was running from something I'd never escape. What did you do? Stopped running. Bought a house that needed work, started a business that barely pays the bills, and just existed. Let myself feel all the things I'd been running from. He met her eyes. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the only thing that actually helped. I don't know how to stop running. Start by standing still. See what happens. Sophie called out from the truck, her voice sleepy. Are you coming over for dinner tomorrow? Dad makes really good pancakes. Arya looked at Ethan, who shrugged. She's not wrong. I do make good pancakes. Is that an invitation? If you want it to be. Everything in Arya's brain screamed that this was a bad idea, that she was getting too attached too fast to people she barely knew, that she should back away now before it got complicated, before she had to explain who she really was, before the inevitable disappointment when they realized she was just a broken person pretending to be whole. What time? She heard herself ask. Sophie squealed. 10 o'clock, and bring the drawings I made you because I want to make more. Bug, she might not want... I'll bring them, Arya promised. She drove away slowly, watching them disappear in her rearview mirror. Ethan standing in the parking lot, Sophie waving from her car seat, both of them getting smaller until they vanished entirely. Back at her penthouse, Arya stood at the windows and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, families were having dinner, kids were doing homework, parents were fighting about whose turn it was to do dishes. Normal, ordinary, messy life happening in normal, ordinary, messy ways. She thought about Monday, the board meeting, the Singapore investors, the carefully constructed empire that was probably falling apart while she stood here eating ice cream and watching soccer games. She thought about Jennifer's speculative looks and Marcus's easy friendship, and Sophie's absolute certainty that showing up was what friends did. She thought about Ethan saying, "Stop running, see what happens." Her phone buzzed. Her COO sending through crisis updates. 6 missed calls from board members. 12 urgent emails that all claimed to be more urgent than the last. Arya turned off her phone and went to bed. When she woke Sunday morning, she felt different. Lighter, maybe. Or possibly just numb to the panic that should have been consuming her. She'd basically abandoned her company for a week. She was watching her empire crumble in real time. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt free. She dressed in the same casual clothes from yesterday. Her wardrobe options for normal person were limited, and drove to the address Ethan had texted her. The blue house looked smaller in daylight, more worn down. The shutters really did need painting. The grass was patchy, but smoke was curling from the chimney, and she could see movement through the kitchen window. She knocked on the door. Sophie answered, still in pajamas, her hair an impressive rat's nest. "You came. Dad said you'd come, but I wasn't completely sure because sometimes grown-ups say they'll do stuff and then they don't." "Sophie, let her in before you interrogate her," Ethan called from inside. The house smelled like coffee and butter. Ethan was at the stove, flipping pancakes with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He was wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt, his hair sticking up in directions that suggested he'd woken up maybe 20 minutes ago. He looked perfect. Coffee? He offered. Please. She sat at the kitchen table while he poured, the same scarred surface where they'd eaten dinner 2 nights ago. Sophie immediately climbed into the chair beside her, dragging over her folder of drawings. I made new ones. Want to see? Always. The drawings were variations on themes Arya recognized now. Houses with rainbow roofs, families holding hands. But there was a new one that made her breath catch. 3 figures again, but this time the tall one had wings. Not broken wings, whole ones, spreading out in purple and gold, detailed in a way that showed hours of careful work. That's you, Sophie explained, after your wings get fixed. They're beautiful. I know, I worked really hard on the feathers. Sophie pointed to each one. See? They're all different, because I figured real wings aren't all perfect and the same. They're messy and weird, and that's what makes them work. Arya traced the drawing with her finger, this child's vision of her healed and whole. Can I keep this one too? Of course, that's why I made it. Ethan set down a plate of pancakes, golden and fluffy and significantly better than anything Arya had made in her designer kitchen. She cut into them and took a bite. They were perfect. These are dangerous, she said. Why? Because I could get used to this. Would that be so bad? Before she could answer, Sophie was chattering about her plans for the day, something involving a fort and a tea party, and requiring Arya's participation. Ethan didn't interrupt, just let his daughter plan their entire Sunday around their guest. They spent the morning in Sophie's room, building an elaborate blanket fort that took over most of the available space. Arya found herself crawling around on the floor, holding up corners while Sophie directed the construction with the authority of a tiny general. This pillow goes here. No, not there. Here. That's not a good supporting pillar. We need the big couch cushion from downstairs. Sophie, we already took all the couch cushions, Ethan pointed out. There's nowhere left to sit. Then we'll sit in the fort. That's the whole point. The fort, when completed, was actually impressive. Multiple rooms. A designated snack area. A reading nook with flashlights. Sophie had even created a sign that said "No boys allowed," which Ethan protested. I helped build it. You can come in for tea party, Sophie conceded, but otherwise it's a girls-only zone. The tea party consisted of apple juice in plastic cups and cookies arranged on paper plates. Sophie insisted on using her fancy voices, which meant they all had to speak in terrible British accents while discussing matters of great importance, such as whether unicorns were better than dragons and why grown-ups made such weird rules. Arya found herself laughing until her stomach hurt, drinking apple juice and eating cookies and discussing the relative merits of magical creatures with absolute seriousness. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed like this. They emerged from this fort around noon, Ethan declaring he needed to sit on actual furniture again. Sophie protested but was overruled. They collapsed on the couch, now missing all its cushions, while Sophie went to get more drawings to show Arya. I'm sorry, Ethan said. She's monopolizing all your time. I don't mind. Really? Because most adults I know would be climbing the walls by now. Most adults you know didn't spend the last decade forgetting how to play. Arya looked at the blanket fort dominating the living room. This is the most fun I've had in years. That's probably sad. It's not sad. It's just honest. Sophie came back with more artwork, and the afternoon dissolved into a comfortable blur. They had lunch, grilled cheese sandwiches that Ethan burned slightly but tasted perfect anyway. They watched a kids' movie that Arya had never heard of. They played a board game that had definitely been designed for younger children, but that Sophie insisted they take completely seriously. Arya won. Sophie accused her of cheating. Ethan refereed their argument with the patience of someone who'd done this before. It was normal, ordinary, exactly the kind of day millions of families were having across the country. And it was everything Arya didn't know she'd been missing. Around 4, her phone buzzed. She'd turned it back on out of habit and immediately regretted it. Her assistant. Another crisis. Another fire that apparently only she could put out. I need to make a call, she said. Use the office, Ethan offered. Second door on the right. The office was small, barely big enough for a desk and filing cabinet. But it was quiet, and when Arya called Claire back, she could hear the concern in her assistant's voice. Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you all day. I was busy. Busy? Arya, the Singapore deal is officially dead. They filed a complaint. Your board is threatening a vote of no confidence. 3 major clients are asking for reassurances that the company is stable. This is a disaster. Arya sat in Ethan's desk chair looking at the papers scattered across the surface. Invoices. Estimates. A child's drawing of a house with their address written carefully at the top. The detritus of a life that was small and struggling and completely real. Let them vote, she said. What? The board. If they want to call a vote of no confidence, let them. I'll be at the meeting Friday. They can say whatever they want. Arya, you're not listening. This is serious. You could lose control of the company you built. I know. Then why aren't you... Claire stopped. What happened to you? I'm figuring out what actually matters. And your company doesn't matter? Arya thought about that. Really thought about it. It mattered. For a long time, it was the only thing that mattered. But somewhere along the way, I forgot why I was building it. I forgot what it was supposed to be for. It's for success, for proving you could do it, for filling the emptiness inside me that no amount of success will ever actually fill. Arya cut her off. I built an empire, Claire, and it left me completely alone. Silence on the other end of the line, then quietly, are you quitting? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just finally admitting that success at the cost of everything else isn't actually success. So what are you going to do? I'm going to finish my week off. I'm going to go to the board meeting Friday and hear what they have to say. And then I'm going to make a decision about what kind of life I actually want to live. Arya stood looking at the closed office door. Beyond it, she could hear Sophie laughing at something. But right now, I'm going to go play another board game with a 7-year-old who thinks I cheat. You're serious. Completely. I don't understand you anymore. That's okay. I barely understand myself. Arya moved toward the door. I'll see you Friday, Claire. Hold down the fort until then. She hung up before her assistant could protest further. When she emerged from the office, Sophie was waiting in the hallway. Are you okay? You sounded sad. Just work stuff. Is someone being mean to you? Kind of. Sophie considered this. Dad says when people are mean, it's usually because they're scared or hurt or don't know how to say what they really feel. Maybe the work people are just scared. You're very wise, you know that? Dad reads me a lot of books about feelings. They rejoined Ethan in the living room. He took one look at Arya's face and said, Bad call? My company is imploding, and I think I might not care as much as I should. How much should you care? More than this. She sank onto the couch. I built that company from nothing. It's been my entire life for 10 years. I should be panicking. Instead, I'm just tired. Tired of the company or tired of being someone you're not? The question hit harder than it should have. Both, maybe. Sophie climbed up beside her. If you don't like your company, make a different one. It's not that simple, Bug. Why not? If something makes you sad, stop doing it and do something that makes you happy instead. Out of the mouths of babes, Arya murmured. They ordered pizza for dinner, cheap chain pizza that Ethan apologized for even though Arya insisted she loved it. They ate in the blanket fort because Sophie demanded it, crouched in the too small space, and getting sauce on the pillowcases. It was perfect. As the evening wore on, Sophie started to fade. Ethan carried her upstairs for her bath, leaving Arya alone in the fort, surrounded by blankets and flashlights and the comfortable mess of a life well lived. She thought about her penthouse, perfect and sterile and empty. She thought about her company, powerful and successful and built on a foundation of loneliness. She thought about the choice she was going to have to make. Ethan came back down an hour later. She's out. Wants you to stay and read her a story tomorrow morning. I'm imposing on your lives. You're participating in our lives. There's a difference. Arya stood, brushing cookie crumbs off her jeans. I should go. It's late, and you probably have work tomorrow. I do, but I also have a friend who looks like she's carrying the weight of the world and might need someone to talk to. Is that what we are? Friends? I don't know what else to call someone who builds blanket forts with my daughter and shows up to soccer games and lets me see her fall apart without trying to fix her. They stood there in the living room, surrounded by Sophie's chaos, and Arya felt something shift. Not breaking, not fixing, just shifting, like a door opening onto a possibility she hadn't known existed. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for this, for all of it, for treating me like I'm just a person instead of whatever the hell everyone else sees when they look at me. You are just a person. That's all any of us are. I forgot that somewhere along the way. So remember it now." She left shortly after, driving back to her penthouse through streets that looked different now. Same buildings, same lights. But she was seeing them with different eyes. Monday would come. The board meeting would happen. Her empire would either stand or fall, based on decisions she hadn't made yet. But tonight, sitting in her perfect apartment with Sophie's drawing spread across her coffee table, Aria Bennett finally let herself imagine what would happen if she chose herself instead of success. If she let the broken wings stay broken and built something new from the pieces. If she stopped trying to fly alone. The thought terrified her, but not as much as the thought of spending another 10 years in this gilded cage, successful and hollow and completely alone. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Aria stood in her closet, staring at the power suits that had been her armor for a decade. Tailored perfection, designer labels, the uniform of someone who had conquered every room she entered. She reached for the navy Armani, then stopped. Her hand moved instead to the simple black dress she'd worn to a charity function once and hated because it made her look approachable. She paired it with flats instead of heels, left her hair down instead of pulled back in the severe bun her board expected. Small rebellions. But rebellions nonetheless. The office felt different when she walked in at 9. Or maybe she felt different and everything else was exactly the same. People stared, whispered. Her assistant nearly dropped her coffee when Aria passed her desk. "You're here," Claire said, like she'd seen a ghost. "I said I'd be back Monday." "I know, but after the week you had, I thought maybe—" She stopped, taking in Aria's appearance. "Are you feeling okay?" "Honestly, I have no idea." Aria kept walking toward her office. "Clear my morning. I need to think." "You have back-to-back meetings starting in— Cancel them." "All of them?" "All of them." She closed her office door before Claire could protest, leaning against it and taking in the space that had been her second home for years. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture that cost more than most people's cars, awards and accolades lining the shelves, evidence of success everywhere she looked. It felt like a museum dedicated to someone she didn't recognize anymore. Her phone buzzed. "Ethan. Hope your first day back isn't too brutal. Sophie wants to know if you're coming for dinner Wednesday. I told her you'd probably be busy, but she's insistent." Aria smiled despite everything. She typed back. "Tell her I'll be there. What should I bring?" The response came quickly. "Just yourself. And maybe patience. She's planning to teach you how to make friendship bracelets. I'm terrible at crafts. That's why you need teaching." She was still smiling when Claire knocked and entered without waiting for permission. Her assistant's face was grim. "The board moved up the meeting. They want to see you in an hour." "They can't just move up a scheduled meeting. They're invoking the emergency clause. Apparently your week of absence constitutes an emergency." Claire set down a folder. "These are the complaints they're filing. It's not good." Aria opened the folder. Abandonment of fiduciary duty. Failure to fulfill contractual obligations. Negligence in handling major accounts. The list went on, each accusation more damning than the last. "They're going to try to remove me," she said. "Yes." "Do they have the votes?" "Probably. You've made a lot of enemies over the years, Aria. People don't forget." She should feel panic, should be strategizing, calling allies, preparing her defense. Instead, she just felt tired. "What do you want me to do?" Claire asked quietly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've worked for you for 5 years. I've seen you build this company into something remarkable. I've also seen what it's cost you." Claire sat down across from her. "So I'm asking, what do you want to do? Fight them? Let them win? Burn it all down on your way out?" Aria looked at her assistant, really looked at her, maybe for the first time. Claire was 32, brilliant, ambitious, underpaid, because Aria had always assumed loyalty didn't need rewarding beyond the prestige of working for her. "Why do you stay?" Aria asked. "What? You could work anywhere. You're smarter than half my executives." Why stay here working ridiculous hours for someone who barely sees you as a person? Claire flinched. Is that what you think? Isn't it true? There was a long pause. Then Claire said, I stayed because I believed in what you were building. This company, at its best, does good work. We've saved failing businesses, created jobs, made things better. She looked down at her hands. But lately, it feels like we've lost sight of why we're doing any of it. Like it's just about winning for the sake of winning. And if I told you I'm thinking about walking away, I'd say it's about damn time. Arya laughed, sharp and surprised. You're supposed to talk me out of it. Why? So you can spend another decade making yourself miserable while the rest of us watch? Claire shook her head. You're not happy, Arya. You haven't been happy in years. Maybe walking away is exactly what you need. The board will destroy everything I built. Will they? Or will they just run it differently than you would? Claire stood. You have an hour. I suggest you figure out what you actually want before you walk into that room. After she left, Arya sat at her desk and stared at the city below. Millions of people down there, living their lives, most of them never knowing her name or caring about her company. The empire she'd built was huge to her, but ultimately inconsequential to the world at large. Her phone buzzed again. Sophie this time, a message sent from Ethan's phone. Hi, Arya. Dad is letting me text you. I drew you another picture. It's a rainbow. Do you like rainbows? I think you should like rainbows. See you Wednesday. Love, Sophie. Attached was a photo of a crayon drawing, bright and messy and utterly joyful. Arya looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at the complaints folder, the accusations and legal threats, and carefully constructed case against her. She thought about what mattered. Then she stood up, straightened her dress, and walked toward the boardroom. The board was already assembled when she arrived. 12 faces she'd worked with for years, some friendly, most hostile. They wanted her gone. She could see it in their eyes. Richard Thornton, the oldest member and biggest shareholder after Arya, cleared his throat. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Bennett. We weren't sure you'd bother showing up. I said I would. You've said a lot of things lately that turned out not to be true. He opened a folder identical to the one on Arya's desk. You assured us the Singapore deal was locked. You promised the expansion timeline was on track. You guaranteed your personal oversight of key accounts. And then you disappeared for a week without explanation, costing this company millions. I took personal time, as is my right. Personal time? Margaret Chen, the CFO, leaned forward. Arya, you've never taken personal time. In 10 years, you've taken maybe 5 days off total. And now, in the middle of our busiest quarter, you suddenly need a week? What are we supposed to think? That I'm a human being who needed a break? We think you're having a breakdown, Richard said bluntly. And while we sympathize, we can't allow personal issues to jeopardize this company. Arya looked around the table. These people had made fortunes off her work. She'd built this company with her own hands, her own vision, her own relentless drive, and now they sat in judgment, deciding if she was still worthy of what she'd created. You're right, she said. The room went silent. I'm sorry, Richard said. You're right. I am having a breakdown. Or a breakthrough. I'm not entirely sure which. Arya sat down at the head of the table, the position she'd occupied for years. I spent 10 years building this company. I sacrificed everything, relationships, health, any semblance of a personal life. I became exactly what I needed to be to succeed. And it worked. We're successful beyond anything I imagined. Then why throw it away? Margaret asked. Because success isn't worth what I paid for it. Arya met each of their eyes in turn. I forgot why I started this company. I forgot what it was supposed to mean. It became about winning, about proving myself, about showing everyone who ever doubted me that they were wrong. And in the process, I lost myself completely. So what are you saying? Richard's voice was cold. You're quitting? I'm saying I don't know. I'm saying I need to figure out what I actually want instead of what I think I should want. She stood. So here's my proposal. Give me 30 days. 1 month to decide if this is still where I belong. If I decide to stay, I'll come back fully committed. If I decide to leave, I'll make the transition smooth and fair. Absolutely not, Richard said immediately. We're not putting this company in limbo for a month while you find yourself. Then remove me now. Call the vote. Do what you came here to do. The room erupted in overlapping voices, some calling for the vote immediately, others urging caution, Margaret trying to find middle ground. Arya stood there and felt nothing but a strange sense of calm. This was it, the moment where everything she'd built would either stand or fall, and she honestly couldn't bring herself to care which way it went. Enough, Richard's voice cut through the chaos. We'll vote now. All in favor of removing Arya Bennett as CEO effective immediately? Hands went up. Arya counted, 8 out of 12. The motion passes. Richard looked at her without sympathy. You have until end of business today to clear out your office. Security will escort you from the building. Arya nodded slowly. Can I say something first? I don't think, please. Something in her voice made him stop. She looked around the table one last time at these people who had been her partners, her adversaries, her entire professional world. I don't blame you, she said quietly. You're doing what you think is right for the company. And you're probably correct. I haven't been fully present. I haven't been the leader this company needs. She picked up her folder, the one full of accusations she'd barely read. But I hope you remember, when you're running things your way, that companies aren't just about profit margins and shareholder value. They're about people, the ones who work here, the ones whose businesses we help, the ones whose lives we touch. She walked toward the door. I hope you don't forget that the way I did. She left before anyone could respond. The walk back to her office felt surreal. People were already staring, word spreading fast in the way it always did in corporate environments. Arya Bennett was out. The empire had fallen. Claire was waiting in her office, her face pale. I heard. Everyone heard, I'm sure. What do you need me to do? Arya looked around at the space that had been hers, the awards, the photos from company events where she'd smiled for cameras while dying inside, the evidence of success that had cost her everything. Help me pack, she said. They worked in silence, boxing up a decade of her life. Claire didn't ask questions, didn't offer platitudes, just helped Arya dismantle the physical evidence of everything she'd been. When they finished, Arya stood in the empty office one last time. What will you do? Claire asked. I have no idea. That's terrifying. Yes. Arya smiled slightly. It's also kind of liberating. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. I didn't make a choice. They made it for me. No, they didn't. You walked in there and told the truth. You could have fought. You could have played politics and called in favors and probably kept your position, but you didn't. Claire handed her the last box. You chose honesty over winning. That's a choice. Security was waiting in the lobby. They weren't cruel about it, just professional. Arya handed over her badge and keys, signed the paperwork terminating her employment with the company she'd built, and walked out of the building for the last time. Her Mercedes was in the parking garage. She loaded the boxes into the trunk, got in the driver's seat, and sat there. She'd just lost everything. Her company, her identity, the purpose that had defined her adult life. She should be devastated. Instead, she felt light. Her phone buzzed. Ethan, how's your day going? Arya laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that echoed in the car. She typed back, I just got fired from my own company. 3 dots appeared immediately, then, are you okay? I don't know. Can I come over? Of course. Door's unlocked. I'm in the workshop out back if I don't hear you knock. She drove to his house on autopilot, her mind blank and racing simultaneously. When she pulled into his driveway, she sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. She was 30 years old, unemployed, untethered from everything that had given her life structure and meaning. She was free. The realization hit her like a wave. She got out of the car and walked around the side of the house, following the sound of a saw running. The workshop was a converted garage, tools hanging on every available surface, sawdust covering the floor like snow. Ethan was at a workbench, cutting a piece of wood with focused precision. He looked up when she entered, killed the saw, and pulled off his safety glasses. That was fast, he said. Then he got a good look at her face. What happened? They voted me out. 8-4. I have to clear out by end of business, which I guess I already did since I brought everything with me. The words came out flat, emotionless. 10 years, gone in one vote. Ethan set down the wood. I'm sorry. Don't be. I basically invited it. Arya sank onto a stool, suddenly exhausted. I stood in that boardroom and told them I didn't know if I wanted to be there anymore. What did I think would happen? You told the truth. The truth got me fired. Did it? Or did it get you free? Arya looked at him, this carpenter in his dusty workshop who somehow saw things more clearly than anyone in her expensive office ever had. I don't know how to be free, she said quietly. Then maybe it's time to learn. He picked up a piece of sandpaper, handed it to her along with a piece of wood. Here, make yourself useful. What? Sand this. Smooth. Even strokes. Don't overthink it. I just lost my company and you want me to sandwood? I want you to do something with your hands while your brain processes. Trust me. She took the sandpaper and wood, feeling ridiculous. But she started sanding anyway, the repetitive motion strangely soothing. Ethan went back to his cutting, the workshop filling with the sounds of work. They stayed like that for an hour. Not talking. Just existing in the same space, doing simple tasks that required no strategy or calculation. Arya's mind slowly quieted. Better? Ethan asked eventually. Maybe. She looked at the wood in her hands, now smooth and free of rough edges. What is this for anyway? Bookshelf for Sophie's room. She's outgrowing the old one. He gestured at the pieces laid out on his workbench. Want to help me put it together? I don't know how to build furniture. I'll teach you. So she spent the afternoon learning to build a bookshelf. Ethan showed her how to measure and mark, how to drill pilot holes so the wood wouldn't split, how to check if something was level. She made mistakes, drilling crooked, measuring wrong, nearly hammering her own thumb. But slowly the bookshelf took shape, something real and solid, built with her own hands. When Sophie got home from school, she found them in the workshop covered in sawdust. You're here, she launched herself at Arya. Did you come for dinner early? Dad said Wednesday, but early is better. I came because I had a bad day and your dad is teaching me carpentry. Sophie studied the bookshelf. That's pretty good for a first try. The corners are a little wonky, but Dad can fix that. Thanks, Bug, Ethan said dryly. What? I'm being honest. You said honesty is important. They carried the bookshelf inside and up to Sophie's room. It fit perfectly against the wall, the wonky corners barely visible once it was in place. Sophie immediately started loading it with books, arranging and rearranging them with serious concentration. It's perfect, she declared. Way better than the old one. Arya looked at this simple piece of furniture, imperfect and handmade, and felt a swell of pride that surprised her. She'd built a billion-dollar company and never felt this satisfied. Stay for dinner, Ethan said. It wasn't a question. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing, you're participating. He looked at her steadily. Unless you want to go home and be alone in your penthouse, processing the worst day of your professional life by yourself. When you put it that way, dinner was simple. Spaghetti again, this time without burnt garlic bread. Sophie talked nonstop about her day. Something about a boy who ate glue and a science experiment with vinegar. Normal kid stuff that had nothing to do with boardrooms or hostile takeovers. Arya listened and felt the knot in her chest slowly unwind. After dinner, Sophie insisted on teaching Arya how to make friendship bracelets as promised. They sat at the kitchen table with embroidery floss and Sophie's instruction book, attempting to follow patterns that seemed simple in theory but proved impossible in practice. You're doing it wrong, Sophie said for the fourth time. I know I'm doing it wrong. I told you I'm terrible at crafts. You just need to focus more. Look, it goes over, under, see? Arya tried again. The bracelet looked like it had been made by someone wearing mittens. In the dark. While drunk, Sophie examined it critically. Well, it's very colorful. Ethan laughed from where he was washing dishes. That's Sophie speak for, that's terrible. I'm being nice. You're being diplomatic. There's a difference. By the time Sophie went to bed, Arya had produced one extremely ugly friendship bracelet that Sophie insisted on wearing immediately. She tied it around her wrist and declared it her new favorite thing. Even though it's wonky? Arya asked. It's wonky because you made it for me. That makes it special. After Sophie was asleep, Arya and Ethan sat on the porch with tea. The night was cool, quiet, except for distant traffic and a dog barking somewhere down the street. You want to talk about it? Ethan asked. The part where I lost everything, or the part where I don't seem to care as much as I should? Either. Both. Arya wrapped her hands around her mug. I spent 10 years building something I thought mattered, and today it was taken away in about 10 minutes. I should be devastated, planning my comeback, calling lawyers, something. She took a sip of tea. Instead, I'm sitting here drinking tea and thinking about how good it felt to build a bookshelf. Maybe that tells you something. That I'm having a crisis? That you've been measuring yourself by the wrong metrics. Ethan leaned back in his chair. You built a company. That's impressive. But did it make you happy? It made me successful. That's not what I asked. Arya thought about the question. Really thought about it. No, she said finally. It didn't make me happy. It made me driven, focused, obsessed, but not happy. And today? Building a bookshelf with wonky corners and eating spaghetti and making terrible friendship bracelets? Today I felt, she struggled for the word, present. Like I was actually living my life instead of managing it. Then maybe losing your company isn't the tragedy you think it is. It's still terrifying. I don't know who I am without it. So figure it out. You have time now. I have money, Arya corrected. Time is one thing, but I still need purpose, direction, something to work toward. Why? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean, why? Why do you need to be working toward something? Why can't you just exist for a while? Figure out what you actually want instead of what you think you should want. Because that's not how I'm wired. I need goals, objectives, metrics of success. Says who? Says everyone. Says the world. Says... She stopped. Says me, I guess. And how's that working out? Arya laughed, but it came out bitter. Point taken. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that had become familiar over the past week. Arya thought about her penthouse waiting for her, empty and perfect. Then she thought about this porch, this house, these people who had somehow become important to her in the span of days. Can I ask you something? She said. When Emma died, how did you know when you were ready to move on? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. I'm not sure I'm ready. Some days I still expect to see her in the kitchen making coffee. Still reach for my phone to tell her something funny Sophie did. He set down his mug. But I realized that moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It means making room for new things while still honoring what was. I'm not mourning a person. I'm mourning an idea of who I thought I was. Same principle applies. Arya absorbed this. What if I don't know how to be someone new? Then you learn. Same way Sophie learned to tie her shoes and I learned to cook without burning everything. You just start, and you mess up, and you try again. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it's also how you actually live instead of just existing. Her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, then saw Claire's name and answered. The board's already announcing their transition plan, her assistant said without preamble. Richard's taking over as interim CEO. They're spinning your departure as voluntary retirement. Of course they are. There's a severance package. It's substantial. They're basically paying you to go away quietly. How substantial? Claire named a number that made Arya blink. They must really want to make sure I don't fight this. Will you? Arya thought about it. About depositions and lawyers and dragging this out in public. About fighting for a company that had stopped feeling like hers long before today. No, she said. Let them have it. I'm done. You're sure? I'm sure. After she hung up, Ethan looked at her questioningly. Severance package, she explained. Enough that I'll never have to work again if I don't want to. And do you want to? Eventually, maybe, but not now. Now I just want to figure out how to be a person again. That seems like a good place to start. It was past midnight when Arya finally left, driving home through empty streets. Her penthouse felt even more hollow than usual, the silence oppressive after the comfortable noise of Ethan's house. She stood at her windows looking out at the city, at the empire she'd conquered and then lost. Tomorrow, the news would break. Arya Bennett, forced out of her own company. The business world would speculate and gossip. Her rivals would gloat. Some would offer sympathy she didn't want. And she would wake up with nowhere to be and nothing demanded of her, and absolutely no idea what came next. The thought should terrify her. Instead, she found herself pulling out Sophie's drawings. The woman with broken wings. The woman with healed wings. The three figures holding hands under a smiling sun. A child's vision of what healing might look like. Arya pinned them to her wall, these pieces of crayon and paper that had somehow cracked her open and let the light in. Then she went to bed, and for the first time in months, slept through the night without waking to check her phone. When morning came, she woke naturally instead of to an alarm. Lay in bed without immediately reaching for work emails. Made coffee and sat on her balcony watching the city wake up, with no agenda and no schedule and no purpose except to exist in the moment. It felt strange, uncomfortable, a little bit wonderful. Her phone buzzed. Sophie again, from Ethan's phone. "Good morning. Dad says you probably need space today, but I wanted to say hi. Also, we're making cookies tomorrow if you want to come help. Dad says I have to warn you they might turn out bad because we're experimenting with a new recipe." "Okay, bye." Arya smiled and typed back, "I'll be there. I'm good at eating bad cookies." Then she set down her phone, finished her coffee, and let herself imagine what it might feel like to build a life that wasn't about success or achievement or proving anything to anyone. Just a life. Small and messy and real. It was terrifying. It was also the first thing that had felt right in 10 years. The news broke Wednesday morning, just as Arya was getting dressed to go help Sophie with the cookie experiment. Her phone exploded with notifications, texts, calls, emails, all from people who suddenly remembered she existed now that her fall from grace was public. She turned it off and drove to Ethan's house. Sophie answered the door wearing an apron that was 3 sizes too big and already covered in flour. "You came! I wasn't sure because Dad said important business people have lots of meetings and might be too busy." "I'm not an important business person anymore," Arya said. "So I'm free all day." "Good, because we're making 3 kinds of cookies and Dad says that's too ambitious, but I think we can do it." The kitchen was already chaos. Mixing bowls everywhere, ingredients scattered across every surface. Ethan stood at the counter looking slightly overwhelmed, reading a recipe on his phone. "Reinforcements," he said when he saw Arya. "Thank God. Sophie has decided we're opening a bakery." "Not a bakery, a cookie store." "They're different." "How are they different?" "Bakeries make bread. We're only doing cookies." Sophie said this like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Arya can help with the chocolate chip ones. You do the oatmeal raisin. I'll do sugar cookies." "You've delegated us," Arya observed. "Someone has to be in charge." They spent the morning making cookies, or trying to. The chocolate chip batch came out flat and crispy instead of soft and chewy. The oatmeal raisin burned on the bottom. Sophie's sugar cookies were so loaded with sprinkles they were more decoration than cookie. None of it mattered. They laughed and made a mess and ate raw dough when Sophie wasn't looking, and then some when she was, because she immediately demanded her share. Arya's phone, even turned off, sat like a weight in her purse. The business world was probably tearing her apart right now. Former colleagues offering false sympathy while celebrating her downfall. Competitors analyzing what went wrong. The press speculating about her next move. And here she was, covered in flour, arguing with a 7-year-old about whether raisins belonged in cookies. "They absolutely do not," Sophie insisted. "They're a classic," Ethan argued. "They're gross. Raisins are just grapes that gave up." Arya laughed so hard she had to sit down. Around noon, someone knocked on the front door. Ethan went to answer it while Arya helped Sophie roll out more sugar cookie dough. She heard voices, Ethan's, and then a woman's that sounded vaguely familiar. Then Jennifer from the soccer team walked into the kitchen, her eyes going wide when she saw Arya. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company." Her gaze swept over Arya's flour-covered clothes, the domestic scene, the clear comfort of someone who belonged here. "I just came to drop off the team schedule for next month." "Thanks, Jennifer," Ethan said, taking the paper she held out. But Jennifer wasn't leaving. She was staring at Arya with obvious recognition now, her expression shifting from surprise to calculation. "I'm sorry, but aren't you... I saw your picture in the business section this morning. Arya Bennett? The CEO who..." "Former CEO," Arya corrected. "And yes, that's me." Jennifer's mouth opened and closed. She looked between Arya and Ethan, pieces clicking into place. You're a billionaire. Was. Technically, I still have the money, but not the company. And you're here making cookies. Apparently. Sophie, oblivious to the tension, held up a cookie cutter. Want to help? We have extra dough. No, I should go. Jennifer backed toward the door, still staring.
I'll just see you at the game Saturday, Ethan. After she left, Arya sighed. That's going to be all over the neighborhood by dinner time. Probably, Ethan agreed. Does it bother you? A week ago it would have. Today I'm mostly annoyed she interrupted cookie time. Sophie beamed. See? Cookies fix everything. They finished baking by mid-afternoon, ending up with 3 dozen cookies of varying quality. Some were actually good. Most were edible.
A few were questionable enough that they agreed to throw them out before anyone got food poisoning.
Our cookie store needs work, Sophie admitted, studying their results.
Maybe we start with a cookie hobby, Ethan suggested. Work our way up.
They were cleaning the kitchen when Arya's phone buzzed. She'd turned it back on out of habit and immediately regretted it.
Claire's name flashed on the screen.
I should take this, she said, stepping onto the porch. I saw the news, Claire said without preamble. Are you okay?
I'm making cookies with a 7-year-old and her dad. So, yes, surprisingly okay. Cookies. Claire's voice was flat. The business world is on fire talking about your fall, and you're making cookies. Technically, we already made them. Now we're trying to decide which ones are safe to eat.
Arya, I'm serious. I'm done, Claire. I'm done caring what the business world thinks. I'm done measuring my worth by their standards. I'm just done. There was a long pause. I believe you. You do? You sound different, lighter, maybe, like you've let go of something heavy. I have. The question is what I pick up instead. Have you thought about what's next? Arya looked through the window at Sophie and Ethan, arguing about whether they should try making brownies next, or if that was pushing their luck.
Not really. For the first time in my adult life, I have no plan, no strategy, no endgame.
And how does that feel?
Terrifying, also kind of amazing.
Claire laughed. For what it's worth, I'm happy for you. You deserved better than what that company became.
Thanks, Claire.
That means a lot. One more thing. The severance package came through. It's in your account. You're officially set for life. After they hung up, Arya stood on the porch for a moment, processing. She was 30 years old, unemployed, and richer than most people could imagine. She could do anything, go anywhere, be anyone. The possibilities were overwhelming.
You okay?
Ethan had come outside, wiping his hands on a dish towel.
My severance package just cleared. I'm officially a woman of leisure.
Congratulations?
I'm not sure if congratulations is the right word. She leaned against the railing. I have enough money to never work again. I could travel the world, buy houses, fund charities, do literally anything I want. And I have absolutely no idea what I actually want.
That sounds like a good problem to have. Does it? Because it feels paralyzing. She turned to look at him. You always seem so sure, like you know exactly what matters and what doesn't. How do you do that? I'm not sure at all. I'm constantly terrified I'm failing Sophie, that I can't give her the life she deserves, that I'm one bad month away from losing everything. He sat on the porch steps. But I figured out that certainty isn't the point. Showing up is the point. Being present. Doing the best you can with what you have. That's not very comforting. No, but it's honest. Sophie poked her head out the door. Are you guys having a serious talk? Because I want to show Arya the fort I built in the living room, and serious talks are boring. We're done, Arya said. Show me this fort. The fort was even more elaborate than last time. Sheets draped over furniture, pillows creating rooms, flashlights providing ambiance.
Sophie had even set up a snack station with their questionable cookies. This is my reading room, she explained, pointing to a corner with books stacked haphazardly. And this is the thinking room, and this is where we have important meetings. What kind of important meetings? Friend meetings, where we talk about important stuff. Sophie settled into the fort's main chamber, patting the spot next to her for Arya to sit. Dad says you lost your job.
I did. Are you sad? Arya thought about how to answer honestly. Not as sad as I thought I'd be. Mostly just confused about what comes next. You could work at the ice cream place. They're hiring. I don't think I'm qualified to scoop ice cream. Everyone's qualified to scoop ice cream. You just put it in the cone. Sophie picked up one of their better cookies, examining it critically. Or you could do something new, something you've never done before. Like what? I don't know.
What did you want to be when you were little, before you decided to be a CEO?
The question hit Arya unexpectedly hard. She tried to remember being young, before ambition and survival had narrowed her world to a single path. What had she wanted? I wanted to help people, she said slowly. Not in a business way, just actually help. Make things better for people who needed it. Then do that. It's not that simple, Bug. Why not? Sophie looked genuinely confused.
If you want to help people and you have money to do it, just start helping. That's what Dad does. Mrs. Chen next door needed her stairs fixed but couldn't afford it, so Dad just fixed them. He said helping doesn't need to be complicated. Arya looked at this child who somehow saw the world in such clear, uncomplicated terms. Your dad is very wise. I know, that's why I keep him. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the fort, talking about everything and nothing. Sophie showed Arya her rock collection, just rocks from the backyard that she'd decided were special. Her favorite books, most of which had been read so many times the covers were falling off. Her drawings of what she wanted to be when she grew up, which changed from page to page. Astronaut, veterinarian, artist, professional cookie maker. You can be all of those things, Arya said, not at the same time. Why not? Who says you have to pick just one thing to be? Sophie considered this.
Nobody, I guess. I just thought grown-ups had to pick one thing and stick with it forever. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we're all so focused on being one thing that we forget we can be lots of things. Arya looked at the drawings spread around them. You know what? I spent 10 years being just one thing, CEO. That was my whole identity. And now that it's gone, I'm realizing I could be anything, or lots of things. Like what? I don't know yet, but I'm starting to think that's okay.
When Ethan called them for dinner, grilled cheese because they'd used up all their energy on cookies, they emerged from the fort like they were coming back from another world. The kitchen felt almost too bright after the cozy dimness of blankets and flashlights. Over dinner, Sophie told Ethan about their conversation in the fort, her version of events somewhat embellished but capturing the spirit. So Arya's going to be lots of things now, she concluded, not just a CEO.
Is that right? Ethan looked at Arya with quiet interest. Apparently, according to Sophie's logic, there's no rule that says you have to be just one thing. Sophie's logic is often better than adult logic. I'm right here, Sophie said. You can just say I'm smart. You're smart, Bug. After Sophie went to bed, Arya helped Ethan clean up the kitchen. They worked in comfortable silence, a routine that had somehow formed over the course of a week. He washed, she dried.
The kind of simple domestic task Arya couldn't remember the last time she'd done. You're quiet, Ethan observed. Just thinking. About? About what Sophie said. About being lots of things instead of just one thing. Arya set down a plate. I built my entire life around being CEO. And when that got taken away, I felt like I'd lost everything because I'd tied my whole identity to it. But maybe that was the mistake. Not building the company, but forgetting I could be more than just that. So what else do you want to be? I don't know. A friend, someone who shows up, someone who makes terrible cookies and builds wonky bookshelves and exists in the world as just a person instead of a position. She paused. Someone who matters to people for reasons that have nothing to do with what I can do for them professionally. Ethan was quiet for a moment, his hands still in the soapy water. You already are those things. You just needed to believe they were enough.
Are they? Enough, I mean? That depends on what you're measuring against. Arya thought about the penthouse waiting for her, empty and perfect. Then she thought about this small, messy house full of life and laughter, and people who had somehow become essential to her in the span of days. Can I tell you something? She said. Always. A week ago, I was sitting in a restaurant waiting for a date who never showed up, and I felt like the loneliest person on earth. I had everything, success, money, power, and I was completely empty inside. She looked at him. And then Sophie handed me a drawing, and you invited me to sit with you, and for the first time in years, I felt seen.
Not as CEO Arya Bennett, but just as Arya, broken and lost and desperately needing connection. You weren't that lost. I am, but I'm starting to find my way. She set down the dish towel. You and Sophie, you saved me. You probably don't even realize it, but you did. You showed me what actually matters. Ethan turned off the water, drying his hands. We didn't save you. We just gave you space to save yourself. Is there a difference? A big one. Saving someone means carrying them. We just walked beside you while you figured out how to carry yourself. They stood in the kitchen, the space between them charged with something Arya couldn't quite name. Not romance, exactly. Something deeper. Recognition, maybe. Two broken people who had found each other at exactly the right moment. I should go, Arya said, even though she didn't want to. You say that every time, but you always look like you'd rather stay. Because I would. This house, you and Sophie, it feels more like home than anywhere I've ever lived. She grabbed her purse. But I need to figure out who I am on my own before I can figure out who I am with other people. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. At the door, she turned back. Thank you for everything. For letting me crash your life and make terrible cookies and hide in blanket forts. For treating me like a person instead of a project or a problem to solve. You were never a project. You were always just Arya. She drove home through the quiet streets, her mind full and settled at the same time. When she got to her penthouse, she didn't immediately go to the windows like usual. Instead, she went to her bedroom and pulled out the business card she'd given Ethan that first night. The one with just her name and number, no title or company. She looked at it for a long moment, then she pulled out a notebook and started writing. Not a business plan, not a strategy, just thoughts, ideas. Things she'd always wanted to do but had dismissed as impractical or unprofitable or not aligned with her goals. Start a foundation for single parents. Fund small businesses that banks wouldn't touch. Create scholarships for kids like Sophie who had potential but no resources. Teach business skills to people who wanted to escape poverty. Actually help people instead of just managing assets and maximizing returns. She wrote until her hand cramped, filling page after page with possibilities. None of it was fleshed out. None of it had metrics or timelines or clear objectives. It was just raw potential, waiting to be shaped into something real. When she finally stopped, the sun was coming up. She'd written through the entire night without noticing, and for the first time in 10 years, Arya felt excited about the future instead of driven by it. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. She'd spend mornings at her penthouse, working on plans for her foundation, afternoons with Sophie and Ethan, learning to be present instead of productive. Evenings reflecting on what she was building and why it mattered. The business world gradually stopped calling. The news cycle moved on to the next scandal. Arya Bennett, former CEO, became yesterday's news, and she found she didn't miss it at all. Saturday came, and with it, another soccer game. The Banana Slugs lost again, but Sophie scored her first goal of the season, a wobbly kick that somehow made it past the goalie. The celebration was disproportionate to the achievement, but that was part of the charm. Jennifer approached Arya during halftime, her expression somewhere between curiosity and respect. I owe you an apology, she said. I was gossiping about you, about Ethan, making assumptions. It's fine. It's not, really. I've been thinking about what you said, about how you don't need an angle to care about people, and I realized I've been treating everything like a transaction. What can people do for me? What can I do for them? She looked embarrassed. It's not a good look. Or, trust me, I understand. I've been doing the same thing for years. Arya watched Sophie celebrate with her team. But I'm learning there's another way. It's harder and scarier, and doesn't come with clear metrics of success. But it's also real in a way transactional relationships never are. Is that why you're here? Instead of rebuilding your empire or whatever billionaires do when they lose companies? I'm here because a 7-year-old girl drew me a picture and reminded me that broken things can be fixed if you let people help. Arya smiled. And because these cookies, she held up the sad excuse for baked goods that Sophie had insisted on bringing as team snacks, matter more than any board meeting I've ever attended. Jennifer looked at the cookies, then at Arya, then laughed. You're not what I expected. Good. I'm trying not to be what anyone expects, including myself. After the game, Ethan suggested they all go to the park. Not for any particular reason, just to enjoy the day. They spread a blanket under a tree and ate the sandwiches Ethan had packed, Sophie running off periodically to chase butterflies or examine interesting rocks. She's happy, Arya observed. She is, Ethan agreed. You're good for her, for both of us. I'm not trying to be anything. I'm just showing up. Exactly. He looked at her seriously. Can I ask you something? Always. What are you going to do? Long term, I mean. You can't just make cookies and watch soccer forever. Why not? Because you're brilliant, driven. You're going to need more than this eventually. Arya thought about the pages of notes in her penthouse, the foundation taking shape in her mind. I'm starting something new, a foundation to help single parents and small businesses, people who need capital and support but can't get it through traditional channels. That sounds amazing. It sounds terrifying. I have no idea how to run a nonprofit. I've only ever focused on profit. She picked at the grass. But I keep thinking about what Sophie said, about helping people not needing to be complicated. And I realized I can use everything I learned building companies to help people build lives instead. When do you start? I already have. I filed the paperwork yesterday, hired a lawyer to handle the legal stuff, reached out to some people I trust to help me set it up right. She looked at him. I'm calling it the Broken Wings Foundation. Ethan's eyes widened. After Sophie's drawing. After the truth a 7-year-old saw that I'd been hiding from myself. Arya watched Sophie, who had found a dandelion and was making wishes as she blew the seeds into the wind. We all have broken wings. We all need help healing. I spent my career breaking people down to build profits. Maybe I can spend the next part building people up instead. I think that's the best thing I've ever heard. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Sophie play. Other families spread around the park, living their ordinary Saturday lives. Kids on swings, dogs chasing balls, couples holding hands. All the small, unremarkable moments that made up a life. Sophie came running back, breathless and grass-stained. Dad! Arya! Look what I found! She held out her hands, revealing a smooth, stone-shaped vaguely like a heart. It's perfect, she declared. It's for you, Arya. For your collection. I don't have a collection. You do now. Every good collection starts with one special thing. Sophie pressed the stone into Arya's hand. This is your first one. You have to keep it forever and remember today. Arya looked at the stone. Just a rock, really, smoothed by water and time into an approximate heart shape. Nothing special to anyone else. Priceless to her. I'll keep it forever, she promised. As afternoon faded into evening, they packed up and headed back to Ethan's house. Sophie fell asleep in the car, exhausted from the game and the park and the endless energy of being 7. Ethan carried her inside and up to bed while Arya waited in the living room. When he came back down, he found her looking at the wall of Sophie's drawings that had accumulated on the refrigerator. She's talented, Arya said. She is. Takes after her mom. Emma was an artist, nothing professional, just for love of it. He stood beside Arya, looking at his daughter's work. She would have liked you, I think. Emma always saw people clearly, would have recognized you were struggling even when you were trying to hide it. I'm not struggling anymore. Or I am, but in a different way, a better way. Because you're building something that matters? Because I'm letting myself matter, period. Not for what I achieve or produce or accomplish, just for being human and flawed and trying my best. Ethan turned to face her fully. Can I tell you something I've been afraid to say? Please. I was terrified when you first showed up here. Not because of who you were, but because Sophie got attached so fast. She's lost so much already. I couldn't stand the thought of her losing someone else. He paused. But watching you these past weeks, seeing you show up again and again, letting yourself be vulnerable and real and present, I'm not scared anymore. What are you? Grateful. Hopeful. Maybe a little bit in awe of someone brave enough to blow up their entire life because a kid handed them a drawing. Arya felt her eyes sting. I'm not brave. I'm terrified every day. Terrified I'll fall back into old patterns. Terrified I'll let you and Sophie down. Terrified I don't know how to be the person I'm trying to become. Being terrified and doing it anyway is exactly what bravery is. They stood there in the quiet house, the space between them charged with possibility. Arya thought about first nights and blind dates and sitting alone in expensive restaurants, about broken wings and wonky bookshelves and cookies that turned out bad but tasted perfect anyway. I need to go, she said softly. I know, but I'll be back. Tomorrow and the day after and every day you'll let me. Because this, she gestured at the house, at the evidence of life being lived, this is what matters. Not empires or achievements or proving anything to anyone. Just showing up for people who see you and let you see them back. We'll be here. She left before she could change her mind, before she could blur the lines between gratitude and something more complicated. She needed to be whole on her own before she could be part of something with others. But driving away, watching the house disappear in her mirror, Arya didn't feel alone. She felt connected. To Sophie and Ethan. To possibility. To the person she was becoming instead of the person she'd been. The foundation paperwork was approved 2 weeks later. Arya rented a small office. Nothing like her previous corner suite with city views, just a simple space with good light and room to grow. She hired a small team, people who believed in the mission more than the paycheck. Started reviewing applications from single parents who needed help getting businesses off the ground. The first grant she approved went to a woman named Maria, 34, raising 2 kids alone while trying to start a catering business. She had talent and drive, but no capital and no connections. The banks had laughed her out of their offices. Arya gave her $50,000, no strings attached.
Just a belief that she'd use it well. Why? Maria asked, holding the check like it might disappear. You don't even know me. Because someone I know taught me that helping doesn't need to be complicated. You need help. I can provide it. That's enough. Word spread slowly at first, then faster. The Broken Wings Foundation became known as the place that actually gave people chances instead of lectures. Arya did interviews, telling her story honestly. The CEO who had everything and nothing.
The foundation built from the rubble of a life that had collapsed under its own weight. Some people called it redemption. Arya called it learning to be human. 6 months after that first dinner at Morelli's, Arya stood in the foundation's office looking at a wall covered in photos. Grant recipients who'd built businesses, changed lives, found footing. Beside each photo, a brief story, not success metrics or profit margins. Just people living better lives because someone had believed in them. Her phone buzzed. Sophie. Dad says you're coming to my birthday party next week. I'm turning 8. That's almost grown up. We're having cake and ice cream. Please come early to help decorate. Dad is terrible at decorating. Love, Sophie. Arya smiled and typed back. I'll be there. I'm terrible at decorating too, but we'll figure it out together. That evening, she stood at her penthouse windows one last time. She'd listed the place for sale that morning. Too big. Too empty. Too much a monument to someone she didn't want to be anymore. She'd found a small house instead. 3 bedrooms, 1 for her, 1 for an office, 1 for guests who might visit. A backyard. A neighborhood with actual neighbors. Walking distance from Ethan's place. Not running toward something, just running toward a different kind of life. Her phone rang. Ethan. Hey, she answered. Sophie wanted me to make sure you know the party starts at 2, but you should come at noon to help set up. Her words, not mine. I got the message. I'll be there. Good. He paused. Also, I wanted to ask you something. What's that? Are you happy? The question caught her off guard. She thought about it, really thought. About early mornings at the foundation. About Sophie's soccer games and terrible cookie experiments. About building bookshelves and making friendship bracelets and all the small, ordinary moments that had filled the space left by her empire. Yes, she said, and meant it completely. I'm happy. Good. You deserve to be. After they hung up, Arya looked at the heart-shaped stone Sophie had given her, now sitting on her desk beside the napkin drawings that had started everything. Broken wings, healed wings, 3 figures holding hands under a smiling sun. A child's vision of what was possible when you stopped flying alone. Sophie's birthday party was exactly as chaotic as expected. Too many kids, too much sugar, decorations that looked like they'd been hung by people who'd never seen a balloon before. Perfect in its imperfection. Arya helped Sophie open presents, build her cake-eating strategy, chase the other kids around the yard. She took 1,000 photos that would never go on social media, just exist in her phone as evidence of moments that mattered. When the party wound down and the last guest left, they collapsed in the backyard, exhausted and sugar-crashed. Best birthday ever, Sophie declared. You say that every year, Ethan pointed out. Because every year is the best. That's how birthdays work. She rolled over to look at Arya. Are you glad you came? More than you know. Good, because you're family now. You have to come to all my birthdays forever. Arya's throat tightened. Forever is a long time. I know, that's why I'm planning ahead. Later, after Sophie had gone to bed still wearing her party hat, Arya and Ethan sat on the porch with tea. Their routine now, comfortable and easy. Thank you, Arya said. For what? For letting me be part of this. Your family, your life. For not treating me like I'm damaged goods or a charity case or a project to fix. You were never any of those things. You were just someone who needed to remember how to be herself. Have I remembered? You tell me. Arya thought about the question. 6 months ago, she would have answered by listing achievements. Companies built, deals closed, obstacles overcome, success measured in external validation. Now she thought about Sophie's laugh, about grants approved and lives changed, about wonky bookshelves and terrible cookies and all the beautiful imperfection of actually living instead of just achieving. I think I'm starting to, she said. Starting to understand that I don't have to be perfect or powerful or prove anything to anyone. I just have to show up, be present, let people see me and see them back. That's all any of us can do. They sat in silence, watching the night deepen. Arya thought about the person she'd been, driven, alone, successful, and hollow. Then she thought about who she was becoming, flawed, connected, building something that mattered for reasons that had nothing to do with profit. I'm selling my penthouse, she said. Yeah? Bought a house 3 blocks from here, smaller, more human-sized. Ethan smiled. Sophie's going to be thrilled. She's been asking when you're moving to our neighborhood. Well, now I can tell her soon. Tell her. Is this permanent? You settling here, building your foundation, becoming part of the neighborhood? Arya thought about it. I don't know. I'm learning not to need everything mapped out 5 years in advance, but for now, for today, this is where I want to be. With people who matter, doing work that means something, building a life instead of an empire. That sounds good. It feels good. Terrifying still some days. I catch myself wanting to fall into old patterns, measure success by numbers instead of impact. But then Sophie shows me another drawing, or you teach me how to build something with my hands, and I remember what actually matters. Which is? Connection, showing up, letting broken wings heal instead of pretending they were never broken in the first place. Ethan reached over and squeezed her hand. Not romantic, just connected. You're going to be okay, Arya Bennett. I know, because I'm not alone anymore. She stayed a while longer, finishing her tea and talking about nothing important. Then she drove to her penthouse one of the last times, already mentally packing for the move to her new house, her new life, her new self. In the morning, she'd go to the foundation, review applications, approve grants, change lives not through acquisition and leverage, but through simple belief that people deserve chances. Tomorrow afternoon, she'd help Sophie with homework. Maybe start teaching her about business in ways that emphasized people over profit. Tomorrow evening, she'd have dinner with Ethan and Sophie, their routine now as natural as breathing. And somewhere in all those tomorrows, Arya would continue becoming someone she actually liked instead of someone she'd been told she should be. Standing at her windows one last time, looking out at the city that had witnessed her rise and fall, Arya Bennett finally understood what Sophie had seen that first night in the restaurant. Broken wings weren't a tragedy. They were just proof that you'd tried to fly. And breaking wasn't failure. It was opportunity to rebuild differently, stronger, maybe, or softer, or just more honest about what wings were actually for. Not for flying alone above everyone else, but for lifting each other up, for showing up, for being human and flawed and perfectly imperfect together. The woman in Sophie's first drawing had wings that were shattered, fragments missing, damage that looked irreparable. The woman in Sophie's latest drawing had wings that were whole again, different from before, patched with care and help from others. Messy and weird, as Sophie had said, and that's what made them work. Arya pulled out the simple business card she'd given Ethan that first night. Just her name. No title. No company. Just Arya. She thought about the scared, lonely woman who'd sat in that restaurant waiting for someone who never came. Then she thought about the woman she'd become, still scared sometimes, still lonely occasionally, but no longer alone, no longer empty. Just human, trying her best, showing up for people who mattered, and somewhere along the way learning that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.